Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Naruto. There is a big problem with my love life options. Chapter 41. You too. Naruto's eyes were moved, and he said in disbelief, "What's going on? When did you get together?" Get together. Ino didn't know what she was thinking, and two suspicious blushes suddenly rose on her pretty face. Naruto, don't talk nonsense if you don't know how to speak. Sakura's mouth twitched, and she couldn't help but said, "What do you mean by getting together? This will cause misunderstandings." Misunderstanding. Naruto blinked and scratched his head. They didn't have any intersection before, and suddenly their relationship became so good. If this is not getting together, what is it? Sakura opened her mouth, wanting to explain but didn't know where to start. In the end, she could only take a deep breath and scolded, "You are such an idiot. Sasuke just had dinner with me yesterday," Yifeng explained lightly. "You guys are having dinner together." Naruto took a breath and blurted out, "Is he the person you've been dating these past 2 days?" Puff. Sakura and Ino almost spit out blood, and even Shikamaru shook his head with a twitch at the corner of his mouth. I don't understand. They really couldn't understand the brain circuit of this little yellow-haired boy. His thoughts and thinking seemed to be separated from the people present by a dimension. Idiot. Sasuke wanted to hold back, but he couldn't hold back in the end. Who is Sasuke scolding? Naruto was instantly furious and jumped up from his chair. Of course whoever is the idiot scolds who. Sasuke said calmly. You, I want to fight you in a duel. HMPH, now even the last one dares to say such things. Okay, I won't punish you today. Okay, that's enough. Yifeng suddenly spoke, helplessly. If you really want to know the contents of this scroll, then study hard. Come to my house after school and I'll show you. HMPH, I'll let you go this time. Naruto looked at Sasuke and said very toughly. I should say this, idiot. Sasuke glanced at him contemptuously, nodded to Yifeng, and then turned to his seat. This fool. Naruto was gnashing his teeth at his attitude, and Shikamaru could only comfort him like a child. Are you going to instill your thoughts into them now? Mrs. Makoto's gentle voice sounded, and her tone was slightly worried. Isn't it a bit too early? The sooner the ideological transformation, the better. Yifeng smiled and said softly, and I won't instill it all at once, just like the test paper I gave to Sasuke. Gradually improve their understanding of the world. This is a subtle process. What about your date with Hinata tonight? Kushina suddenly spoke. Yifeng was silent for a moment, and said cautiously, you didn't say you wanted to date, you just asked if you had time tonight. Scumbag. Kushina snorted coldly. Yifeng's expression fell into a stagnation, and he didn't understand how he became a scumbag. Take Hinata with me. Kushina spoke again, and said lightly, since you have already teased her, you are not allowed to give up halfway. The setting sun is like blood, and the twilight gradually dyes the earth. Yifeng's hut is located at the edge of the eastern district of Konoha. The originally quiet environment seems a bit lively today. This is my first time to visit a boy's house. It feels a bit novel. Ino looked around the furnishings and utensils in Yifeng's house and said with a smile, do you really live alone? It's too tidy, isn't it? Indeed, it's amazing. Sakura agreed and exclaimed. Even her own room was tidied up by her mother, while Yifeng, a boy, could keep the whole house in order. Thank you, I just have a little obsessive-compulsive disorder. Yifeng smiled gently, picked up a new test paper from the desk and spread it out. Everyone, this is the content of the scroll. Let me see. Naruto rushed forward with a shout, and then his expression was stunned. Elementary school student mock test paper. What does elementary school student mean? Wait, you gave Sasuke a test paper. This time it's not just Naruto. In the whole room, except for Sasuke, Shikamaru, Ino, Sakura, and Hinata all looked at each other in bewilderment. They had many guesses before. For example, the content of the scroll was some powerful ninjutsu or some mysterious sealed ninja tool, but it turned out to be just a set of test papers. Yifeng was urging Sasuke to do the test papers. Why does this sound so funny? I made an agreement with Sasuke before. Yifeng smiled and said softly, if he can get 50 points on this test paper, I will personally teach him how to become stronger. 50 points. Sakura was stunned and said, what is the full score? Quote, 100. Yifeng answered. How many points does Sasuke have now? Naruto asked with concern. Sasuke is indeed a genius. Yi Feng praised and said with emotion. Even if he has not learned any basics, he can still get a good score of 20 points. More? How much? Naruto couldn't hold it in and laughed out loud. 20 points. Ha 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 ha, can you be called a genius with only 20 points? Even when I took the theory test, I still got 40 points. Humph. Sasuke snorted coldly. His face looked a little unhappy. When he went back last night and stayed up all night to finish this set of test papers, he knew that he might not get 50 points. The reason is very simple. He had never heard of most of the questions. But these questions were not the kind of strange questions that deliberately made people difficult. Instead, they looked very basic. It was these basics that made him rack his brains. After writing down the answers with great difficulty, he found that he seemed to be wrong when checking and comparing, but he didn't know where he was wrong. He only had a vague feeling that he had written it wrong. Sure enough, this score also proved his guess. Is this true? Sakura was stunned and said in disbelief. Even Sasuke-kun only got 20 points. It's terrible. Ino took a breath, rubbed his arms and said, although I haven't seen the questions yet, I have started to get goosebumps on my body. Quote. Let me do it. Naruto volunteered and said loudly, I will get 50 points today and let a certain arrogant guy see what a true genius is. I want to try too. Hinata, who was like a small transparent person in the crowd, mustered up the courage to raise her hand. Okay. Yi Feng did not stop him, and smiled and spread the test paper on the table. You guys take your time to try, I'll go cook first. Everyone gathered around and began to discuss the questions in the test paper. Only Shikamaru changed color after taking a look, got up and chased Yi Feng to the kitchen. He came to his side and asked in a low voice, Yi Feng, what on earth are you going to do with this? Huh, Yi Feng looked at him with pretended confusion. Don't play dumb, you guy. Shikamaru carefully glanced outside the door and said in a low voice, analyzing the nature of ninjas and breaking down the structure of the ninja world, this is not as simple as a student test paper, right? Do you want to be a traitor, Yi Feng? Quote. Traitor. Yi Feng's mouth curled up, revealing a sarcastic smile on his face, and said, it's really a severe accusation, Shikamaru. I just tried to guide the correct thoughts. In your eyes, is that a betrayal of Konoha? You should know that Konoha cannot tolerate your so-called correct thoughts. Shikamaru took a breath. But someone will do it after all. Lies can never replace the truth. Yi Feng stood by the stove wearing an apron and cut the ingredients prepared on the chopping board into cubes. Do you want to be the savior of this world? No, to be more precise, it should be a gravedigger. The night was filled with stars. The students who came to visit said goodbye to Yi Feng and set off on their journey home. It's amazing. Ino pulled her best friend's sleeve and whispered, I didn't expect Yi Feng to cook so deliciously. He is simply a versatile super quality stock. Yeah, Sakura nodded in agreement and sighed, it's a pity that she has been on blind dates several times. What does it matter? Ino glanced at her with burning eyes, raised her delicate eyebrows and said, can those blind date women compare to my childhood sweetheart? Ching, childhood sweetheart. Sakura was stunned. No, sister, we didn't drink when we had dinner just now, how could you get yourself drunk like this? Where did the childhood sweetheart come from? Have we been in the same class since the first grade? Ino curved her lips and smiled, that means we grew up together, so why can't we be childhood sweethearts? Isn't your definition of childhood sweethearts too sloppy? Sakura couldn't help but complain, saying, please wake up, you basically didn't talk to him in the first 2 years of ninja school. Sakura, are we good girlfriends? Ino asked solemnly. Yes, yes. Sakura was stunned by her change of attitude and nodded quickly. Then do you support me in pursuing Yi Feng? Ino put his hand on her shoulder and said in a seductive tone, this way you can concentrate on pursuing Sasuke, no one will stop you. Don't give me the love potion. Sakura reacted and slapped the other's hand on her shoulder, saying helplessly, it's useless even if I support you in this matter. I haven't said a few words to classmate Yi Feng. It's useful. Ino showed a plan on his face and said, when the time comes, you have to accompany me to visit his house frequently in the name of studying. Ah, I want to go too. Sakura pointed at her nose and said in surprise, but I really can't understand those test papers, my head is big. I bet Sasuke will go often. Ino raised his eyebrows again and said meaningfully, classmate Sakura, you don't want us to exclude you from the circle in the future, right? Sakura's mouth twitched fiercely, and her head was full of black lines. On the other side, that's all. Walking to the fork in the street, Hinata saluted carefully and said, thank you for sending me off. Naruto-kun, Shikamaru-kun. It's okay, this is what Yifang specifically told me. Naruto winked and said meaningfully. Yeah, Hinata's pretty face immediately blushed, and she ran away from the long street. We should go back too, Naruto. Shikamaru glanced at the Hyuga maid standing at the corner waiting for Hinata, and said lightly. Hehe, today is the best dinner I've ever had. Or with Sakura. Naruto smiled playfully, holding his hands behind his head, and sighed, it would be even more perfect if Sasuke, that arrogant guy, wasn't here. Shikamaru didn't respond, and seemed a little worried. Hey, Shikamaru. Naruto obviously noticed his abnormality and asked with a puzzled expression, what's wrong with you? Naruto, Yifang. Shikamaru paused halfway through his words and shook his head gently, saying, no, nothing. Let's separate here, see you tomorrow. What are you doing, so mysterious? Naruto scratched his head as he watched him leave, and turned to walk towards his home. Konoha's underground base. Yifang, Makoto and Kushina sat by the monitor and took in the scene in front of them. It seems that my prediction is correct, Shikamaru will not tell on you. Yifang said with a slight smile on his face. Is it possible that Naruto is too stupid, and it's useless to tell him? Kushina crossed her arms and said lightly, so, I still have reservations. Mrs. Makoto was speechless and said, Kushina, isn't it a bit? A fool is a fool, I'm being realistic. Kushina spread her hands and sighed, I've been thinking about who this fool is after, but I still don't have an answer. I don't think Naruto is a fool, he's just slow in some aspects. Yifang made a fair evaluation. Here comes Weiyu. Mrs. Makoto pointed to the monitor, and Weiyu, dressed in roots, was standing outside the door of Yifang's hut. Come in, Ms. Weiyu. Yifang almost didn't hide anything from the people he recognized, and spoke directly to the monitor. Click. The door of the hut opened automatically, and Weiyu saw the entrance to the underground when he entered the room. Go down the stairs and walk into the base. Weiyu's expression was stunned, obviously shocked by the generosity of his leader. The other party had created such a big scene under Konoha, but the Konoha high-level officials knew nothing about it. Let's go see Danzo. Yifang walked out of the monitoring room and appeared in front of Weiyu. Kushina and Makoto had already entered Yifang's body again. The two ladies didn't want to see other people yet. Yes, Weiyu nodded, not surprised why the boy in front of him knew her intention. For Weiyu now, his leader is simply a god. All-knowing and omnipotent. Root base. Danzo. Yifang stood in front of Danzo and bowed respectfully. Xiaolin Yifang, what do you think of that kid from the Uchiha family? Danzo asked condescendingly with his eyelids drooping. Sasuke is excellent. Yifeng lowered his head and said without sadness or joy, I believe that in time, he will become a very remarkable ninja. Humph, it seems that you think highly of him. Danzo snorted lightly, and said with a cold expression, what if I tell you that he will be a threat to Konoha in the future? I will kill him myself. Yifeng said solemnly. Very good, I know you won't let me down. Danzo nodded with satisfaction, and said in a slow tone, but before that, you need to do another thing first. Please give orders, Lord Danzo. Konoha's S-level rebel Uchiha Itachi is currently hiding in the Akatsuki base in the Hidden Rain village. I have a way for you to gain his trust and find an opportunity to kill him. Yes, you can go. Soon after Yifeng left, Danzo's eyes suddenly flashed with a blood-red light. But he waved his right arm, and the bandages wrapped around it broke one after another, revealing the horrifying scene inside. The milky white bone covered his entire arm, with a row of sharp bone spurs in the middle, which looked extremely ferocious. Congratulations, Danzo, your super form has lasted longer. Weiyu, standing under the high platform, exclaimed. Not enough, this is far from enough. Danzo said this, but his expression looked very proud. Go inform Hanzo of the salamander and ask him to prepare 10 more of these potions for me. Yes, Weiyu nodded respectfully. Very good, their wave country will have another considerable income. Is Danzo sick? On the way home, Kushina couldn't help but complain. He is so anxious to kill all the Uchiha. Did the Uchiha dig up his ancestral graves? Dig up ancestral graves. Yi Feng's mouth twitched slightly. This red-haired lady is getting better and better at making jokes now. I don't know what shocking words she will come up with in the future. She was quite emotional in her heart, but said calmly on the surface, he has been corroded by the hollow now, and he will become more and more extreme in the future. Don't let him die so early, Yi Feng-kun. Mrs. Makoto suddenly spoke, her voice no longer as gentle as before. That would be too easy for him. No mother would remain gentle when hearing someone wants to kill her child. Uchiha Makoto has been very restrained, and even tried her best to suppress her murderous intentions. Okay, Yi Feng didn't say much, but simply agreed. Speaking of which, why did Danzo know that Itachi was in the Akatsuki organization? Kushina asked curiously. Of course Itachi told him himself. Yi Feng smiled slightly and said, Sister, you won't forget that Itachi himself was a spy who was voluntarily placed in the Akatsuki organization. And his direct superior is most likely Danzo, otherwise how can Danzo let me gain Itachi's trust? Kushina took a deep breath and said angrily, Danzo is a real fool, he specifically targets those who are loyal to Konoha. The morning breeze blew, and white clouds floated. Ninja school classroom. Several people who attended the dinner at Yi Feng's house yesterday gathered around him spontaneously, listening attentively to his explanation of the various key points on the test paper and the mistakes they made. The explanation was simple and humorous, and everyone showed a surprised expression from time to time. Their actions naturally attracted the attention of other students, but due to the tyranny of Yi Feng, the top student in the grade, they only dared to look around curiously from the outside. Ha 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 ha, I already know everything. Naruto suddenly shouted in surprise, scaring the people around him. Let's do it again tonight. I will definitely get a higher score than the arrogant Sasuke. Idiot. Sasuke was too lazy to pay attention to him. He looked at Yi Feng and said, if I'm not mistaken, you should change the topic tonight, right? Ah, Naruto immediately wilted, staring and said, why change it? It doesn't make sense. There is no free lunch in the world. This is something that even fools know. Sasuke looked at Naruto meaningfully. What do you mean? Naruto was stunned and frowned, saying, you fool, you dare to laugh at me for being a fool. Is stating the facts also considered laughing? Sasuke snorted. You, Naruto-kun, you are making so much noise that it's not appropriate. Ino interrupted Naruto's next words and whispered, it's Teacher Yi Feng's teaching time now. Teacher Yi Feng. Naruto blinked and said in surprise, why did you become a teacher out of nowhere? Since we are learning the knowledge taught by Yi Feng-kun, it's normal to call him teacher, right? Ino looked around and said as a matter of course, besides, don't you think Yi Feng-kun is much better than most ninja school teachers? That's right. Sakura nodded in agreement and said softly, the theoretical lessons of ninja school teachers are always confusing and take a long time to understand. But Yi Feng-kun's explanation will not give this feeling. A few words can make people suddenly enlightened. Hearing this, Ino gave her best friend a thumbs-up look. This supporting role is well done. I also think. Yi Feng-kun teaches very well. Hinata blushed and said weakly. Look, now most of us have reached a consensus. Ino smiled and said proudly, as a member of the class reunion, I declare that the title of Teacher Yi Feng is settled. What do you mean by most people? It's obviously only you three. Naruto didn't dare to refute him in person, but just muttered in a low voice. What is a class reunion? Sakura said in astonishment. She had never heard of this new organization. Since we are all receiving the teachings of Teacher Yi Feng, we must give the small group a resounding name. Ino raised her head and talked freely. Class reunion, don't you think it's appropriate? This girl is very excited. Mrs. Makoto smiled as she watched this scene and said, does she like studying so much? I think she is not interested in studying. Kushina snorted lightly, and said with a meaningful expression, Teacher Yi Feng, what do you think? Yi Feng took a breath and prepared to change the subject, and the golden option interface suddenly popped up in front of him. Choose. 1. Make the best of a bad situation. Take Yamanaka Ino's hand and perform a song, Love and Loyalty are worth 1,000 gold. 2. Compensate the jealous wife. Summon Kushina and show your affection in public. 3. Show her something powerful. Use memory transmission to instill your masterpiece from 2 years ago into the other party. Yi Feng wanted to curse at this time. What kind of checkbox is this? It's so poisonous. Love and loyalty are worth 1,000 gold. Show your affection in public. Your masterpiece from 2 years ago. Each one is more shameful than the other. Is this an option that a human can come up with? This shitty system is really a bunch of crap. Forget it. Rather than letting others share the pain, it's better to bear it alone. Yi Feng took a deep breath and activated the memory transmission on the red-haired wife in his body. Kushina was waiting for his answer, but suddenly she was startled. Her eyes widened and her mouth gradually opened. A piece of information appeared in her mind. To be more precise, it was a literary work. Hashirama returns. He found his wife Uchiha Madara living in a doghouse and summoned 100,000 white Zetsu in anger. Puff. Kushina almost spit out a mouthful of salt soda after reading it. She was dumbfounded. Can you guys who are engaged in literary creation still play like this? Congratulations on obtaining 40 years of chakra energy. The reward prompt popped up in front of him, and Yifeng was not happy at all. He was struggling with himself. How to explain to Mrs. Kushina that I am not a gay lover? At this moment, Kurigakure, the 4th generation Mizukage Yagura, sat in his office chair with a dull expression, like a puppet. The masked man in a black robe standing behind him held a document in his hand and asked in a puzzled tone, "Joint Chunin exam. What do those old guys in Konoha want to do?" Not only Kurigakure, but also Iwagakure, Kumogakure, Sandagakure and even some small ninja villages have received invitations. Standing opposite the masked man, the pitcher-like white Zetsu grinned. Even Nagato's Raingakure. So almost all ninja villages have received their invitations. The masked man narrowed his eyes and fell into deep thought. According to my understanding, the black Zetsu attached to the white Zetsu said hoarsely, with a sneer on his face, Sarutobi Hiruzen may want to use the Chunin exam as a link to develop good relations with other ninja villages. Naive. The masked man was silent for a moment and made a cold comment. Indeed, it is a bit too naive. Black Zetsu nodded in agreement and said, the 3rd Hokage is no longer the former ninja hero. His eyes are full of desire and prayer for peace. So he certainly could not have expected that Onoki of Iwagakure and Rasa of Sand Village had secretly formed an alliance. They were preparing to launch a fatal attack on Konoha on the day of the Chunin exam. Humph, I think that scene would probably be very interesting. The masked man sneered. More than that, White Zetsu added, saying in a detached tone, although I of the Hidden Cloud Village rejected Konoha's invitation on the surface, they have actually begun to prepare a strategy for invasion. Tisk tisk tisk, it seems that Sarutobi Hiruzen will have a headache at that time. Black Zetsu smacked his lips and chuckled, no. To be more precise, it is a question whether he can survive after the Chunin exam. According to the news passed by the clone, Konoha is now in a mess. White Zetsu spoke again, gloating, Danzo has been isolated by other Konoha high-level officials and has begun to take a different approach. Take a different approach. The scarlet right eye of the masked man looked at White Zetsu. Oh, White Zetsu enjoyed this kind of attention and said with a smile, he even gave orders to his subordinates to attack the brothers Itachi and Sasuke. What? The masked man was stunned and said in astonishment, Danzo is going to attack the 2 brothers Itachi and Sasuke. Stupid. The masked man was really confused at this moment. Where did Danzo get the confidence to do such a thing? Even he was full of fear of Uchiha Itachi. The strength and combat IQ of this young man were not inferior to his former teacher. Yes, Danzo has recently accepted a capable subordinate. White Zetsu grinned, with a very happy expression on his face. I'm afraid it's because of this person that he has become arrogant. Oh, the masked man narrowed his scarlet right eye, but he didn't care much in his heart. In his opinion, no matter what kind of subordinates Danzo accepted, they would never be Itachi's opponent. The elder of Konoha was obviously ordering his subordinates to die, but it was in line with his character. That person's name is Zhaolin Yifeng, and he's only 10 years old. Bai Zetsu was still showing off his exclusive information, grinning and saying, but it's incredible, he actually created such a terrifying illusion at this age. Illusion. The masked man was stunned for a moment, and said lightly, "Don't worry, this kid is dead." Playing illusions in front of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Not to maintain his character, he really wanted to laugh out loud. The night was dark. How detestable. Those Kusagakur guys. They killed the ninjas in their own village to such an extent just for an unnecessary war. In the small house of Yifeng's family, Naruto's angry voice rang out. "Oh, so scary." Sakura took a deep breath and said with a moved expression, "So such terrible things are happening in the ninja villages outside." Terrible things are not only happening in the ninja villages outside. Ino patted her best friend's shoulder and sighed, "It also happened in our Konoha." As she spoke, she glanced at Sasuke leaning against the wall with a meaningful look. "Tell me this true experience for our learning task today." Yi Feng, wearing black framed glasses, sat at the long table and said in a gentle voice, "How do you think we can avoid such a thing from happening?" "Beat those guys with bad intentions." Naruto spoke first and shouted loudly, "Beat them until they are scared, and then make them promise not to do such things again." Promises should be useless, right? Sakura frowned and said softly, "Even if they temporarily succumb to your force, what if they continue to do it after you leave?" "We should send Rina and her daughter to a safe place." Ino pondered for a moment and expressed his opinion, "Hide their identities so that they will not be coveted by others." "Humph, that's just a temporary solution." Sasuke snorted and said lightly, "It can't change the essence of the problem." "What do you think, Sasuke?" Sakura asked with a burning gaze. "Except for the mother and daughter, all the ninjas in Kusagakur village will be killed," Sasuke said with cold eyes and a proud expression. Kill them all." Sakura's expression suddenly became a little stiff, and she said intermittently, "Isn't this too extreme? Long-term illness requires heavy medicine. The village that treats human life as recovery medicine is obviously hopeless." Sasuke glanced at her and said indifferently, "Let them survive in the world, they will only continue to harm others." "I don't agree." Naruto slapped the table and stood up and said, "If you kill casually like you do, what's the difference between you and the fools in the Kusagakur village?" "The difference is that I stand on the side of justice," Sasuke said lightly. "Bullshit, you are not justice at all," Naruto retorted. Two. Hinata, who was sitting on the side, was obviously frightened by the scene, but her first reaction was not to escape, but to mediate the dispute between the two. Unfortunately, the voice was too small, and Naruto and Sasuke didn't hear it. "Why don't you listen to Teacher Yifeng's opinion?" Shikamaru suddenly spoke, interrupting the two people's swords. "Since it is a question raised by Teacher Yifeng, there should be a standard answer, right?" As he spoke, he looked at the boy with glasses with a meaningful look. Shikamaru is now more and more certain that his good brother is planning something big behind the scenes. Not only that, the other party also wants to mix up the students present. This makes Shikamaru feel complicated and hesitant. Should he follow up or stay away from this vortex completely? Shikamaru has no answer yet, so he wants to get more information from Yifeng so that he can make a judgment. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the room immediately turned their eyes to Yifeng, and their faces showed expectant expressions. Unfortunately, there is no so-called standard answer to this question. Yifeng smiled and said softly, "Everyone has different thoughts and values, and the solutions they come up with are also different. In other words, your answers can actually be regarded as answers." Everyone was stunned and looked at each other. "It's just an answer, but it's not the best solution in your mind, right?" Shikamaru stared at his friend, with a serious expression on his face that he had never had before. "Teacher Yifeng, I want to know what the best solution in your mind is." "Break the old Kusagakur system and build a new Kusagakur system." Yifeng's mouth corners slightly curved, and said calmly, "These two are a whole, and they must go hand in hand and are indispensable." "Break the old system and build a new system." Everyone muttered this sentence in their mouths, thinking. Shikamaru quickly understood the deep meaning of it, and took a breath with complicated eyes and said, "The road you chose is destined to be a sea of blood and corpses. Is it worth it? Death is not worth fearing. Not knowing why to die is the real horror." Yifeng's lips spit out lightly, and his eyes behind the transparent lenses seemed to be burning with fire. "Shikamaru, I think you should understand this truth." Shikamaru fell into silence, his eyes tangled. "Let's stop here today, everyone." Yifeng looked at the classmates in the room and smiled gently, I have prepared some written materials for you, hoping to answer your current doubts. The so-called written materials are actually part of the textbooks of Wave Country compiled by Yifeng. It includes the analysis of the structure of the ninja world, the origin of ninjas, and the nature of daimyo and nobles. Everyone took the books and said goodbye one after another. Sasuke stayed and looked at Yifeng with complicated eyes and said, "What you just said is not just directed at Kusugakure, right?" Although he is not as sharp-minded as Shikamaru, the hedgehog-headed boy in front of him is also a smart man. As long as he thinks about it for a while, he will understand the deep meaning of Yifeng's words. Indeed, the backward old system is a common phenomenon in the ninja world. Yifeng did not hide it and said very bluntly, "Kusugakure has it, and other ninja villages also have it. So, are you going to be an enemy of the entire ninja world?" Sasuke took a breath and said in a low voice, "You were wrong, Sasuke." Yifeng's mouth curled up, and he smiled gently. Those oppressors who follow and maintain the old system can't actually represent the entire ninja world. They are just good at disguising themselves. They disguise their own interests as the interests of the entire ninja world, but in fact they are persecuting and enslaving the lower classes. Sasuke stopped talking and fell into deep thought. "Sasuke, I have an old friend here who has always wanted to see you." Yifeng walked to the side of the cupboard and tapped the wall beside him. Click. In Sasuke's surprised and stunned eyes, the floor was separated into a dark passage. This is. Please go in, she's inside." Gulp. Sasuke swallowed his saliva, his face full of shock. It was not until today that he realized how hidden his peer was. He actually built a secret base under his own house. This kind of thing is definitely not allowed by the Konoha high-level officials. Didn't they find out at all? Also, who is that old friend who wants to see him? Sasuke was very curious, but also very nervous. He should have discovered Yifeng's hidden thoughts and secrets now. Would he be silenced? Or, is this a trap? Forget it. Sasuke took a deep breath and walked down the stairs. At this point, retreating will make the other party look down on him. For the glory of Uchiha, he will hold his head high even if he dies. Unexpectedly, the environment below is not as dark as Sasuke originally imagined, but as bright as day. Walking through the long corridor, you can see all kinds of sci-fi research equipment placed in the compartments on both sides. Until the end of a huge platform supported by dozens of pillars, Sasuke's eyes appeared with a familiar back. Black hair shawl, wearing a dazzling black gauze dress, slowly turned around and showed a gentle smile to Sasuke. "Long time no see, little Sasuke." Mom. Sasuke's pupils dilated and he shouted with a moved face. Now Makoto has got what she wanted. Looking at the scene of the Uchiha mother and son interacting not far away, Kushina sighed softly. "If you want, you can." Yifeng stopped writing and looked at her. "Forget it, my silly boy hasn't gotten it yet." Kushina shook her head and said helplessly, "There is no practical significance in recognizing each other, and I'm afraid he will make my blood pressure soar." It's not impossible. With Naruto's unexpected personality, there is a high probability that the warm mother-son reunion will turn to an unknown node. But Yifeng thinks this is not the main reason. The key is that the red-haired lady feels that she owes something to her child and can't get over that hurdle. Even though Naruto's childhood suffering did not come from her, but was deliberately created by the current Konoha high-level officials. But as a mother, Kushina still feels guilty for not being able to give her child a happy childhood. Yifeng did not comfort or enlighten her about this, and picked up the pen and devoted himself to the document in front of him again. There is no point in other people's comfort in this kind of situation. Kushina has to get out of it by herself. Click. Just as Yifeng was writing furiously, a white jade-like foot rested on his elbow. His expression was stunned for a moment, and Yifeng looked at the owner of the foot. A certain red-haired lady seemed to be fine, and turned her face away and didn't look at him. Yifeng raised his eyebrows, grabbed Kushina's ankle and put it on the table next to him. But before he could continue working, the foot rested on his elbow again. "Sister, what's the matter?" Yifeng asked helplessly. Kushina ignored him at all, and even picked up a book and started reading by herself. Yifeng was full of black lines, and stretched out an index finger to poke the sole of Kushina's foot. The 5 toes curled up cutely, but still remained strong and did not give in. "Okay, Okay, you force me to use my trump card, right? Madam, you probably haven't seen what a pervert is. Yifeng was about to get angry and was about to put his mouth close to it to pretend to eat ice cream. Hey, this guy is here again. Kushina put down the book in her hand and pointed at the monitor. A sneaky white figure appeared in Yifeng's hut in the picture, looking around quietly. When he found no one, he immediately showed a happy expression on his face and ran into the bathroom with his waist crouched. 10 seconds later, he came out again with a frustrated look. What's wrong with this white Zetsu? Kushina frowned and said with a confused expression, why does it look so lost every time it comes out of your bathroom? What is it looking for? That's right, this sneaky figure is white Zetsu. Yifeng had already discovered it when it first appeared around Danzo. But Yifeng did not make a fuss or capture this white Zetsu. Instead, he kept observing its movements with the monitor. Until the last few days, this white Zetsu obviously turned its attention to Yifeng. He frequently went in and out of his house, especially his bathroom, which was a daily check-in spot. This operation really confused Kushina. Is it possible that it is looking for a defense? Yifeng said with a serious expression. What, have you forgotten its daily behavior in front of Obito and Uchiha Madara? It always talks about poop. It seems so, but Kushina still couldn't understand it. Running to someone's bathroom to look for a defense was really beyond her understanding. Interesting, it seems to be very interested in the books I wrote. The white Zetsu in the monitor seemed to be frustrated for a moment because he couldn't find a defense, but soon he was attracted by a book on the bookshelf. He found it out with ease, sat on a chair and started to study. Let's go, let's ask it about its reading experience. Yifeng patted Kushina's smooth instep and stood up. In the hut, the white Zetsu clone was completely immersed in the truth described in the book, and didn't feel that there were two more people behind him. People are not abstract independent individuals, but the sum of all social relations. Based on this theory, even some non-human species, as long as they have human consciousness, thinking and emotions, they can be called people. They have human rights, and are also objects that need to be liberated. They should not be imprisoned and reduced to tools by the oppressors. After reading the last sentence, the white Zetsu clone suddenly had the urge to cry. The previous muddleheadedness suddenly woke up at this moment. That's right, it should be a human, with human rights. But Uchiha Obito and the white Zetsu original body kept exploiting it, requiring it to run around to collect intelligence every day. Even Guan, the time for observing human feces is also limited. The previous white Zetsu clone didn't think there was anything wrong with this. But now, it just wants to rush to Obito and the original body and say, no. Go to hell, I won't serve you anymore. Why didn't I realize this earlier? The white Zetsu clone wiped away its non-existent tears and sighed softly. A hand reached out from behind it and handed it a tissue. Thank you. The white Zetsu clone took the tissue and wiped his face, and his body suddenly stopped. He turned his head stiffly like a machine, and the boy wearing black framed glasses came into view. Subconsciously, the white Zetsu clone wanted to burrow into the ground and escape. Buzz. A terrifying sense of oppression suddenly descended, imprisoning its entire body in place. Nice to meet you, Mr. White Zetsu. In White Zetsu's sight, the boy in front of him only had the glasses flashing silver, and he himself was in the dark. No, to be more precise, the boy is the darkness itself. I'm curious. Yifeng's lips spit out gently, and his voice was gentle. Do you have a name? 007. The white Zetsu clone felt that every cell in his body was trembling. This kind of desperate panic was not brought to him even by Uchiha Madara, whom he once served. I am the seventh clone born in the main body. So that's it, White Zetsu 007. Yifeng nodded gently and said lightly, please tell me, are you willing to join us to save your compatriots? The white Zetsu clone only felt that the pressure surrounding it suddenly dissipated, and joy appeared on its face. I really can. Of course. Yifeng nodded decisively, and smiled like a warm spring breeze. We welcome everyone with the same aspirations. Leader. White Zetsu 007 was full of joy at finding the organization, but at this time he changed the subject and said, can I watch you poop every day? Question mark. The smile on Yifeng's face suddenly disappeared, and the corners of his mouth could not help but twitch. Ha ha ha. The smile now shifted to Kushina's face, and the red-haired lady urged loudly, promise it, quickly agree to it. As a leader, how can you ignore such a small request from your comrade? Comrade 007, now there is a small task for you to complete. Yifeng directly used the method of changing the subject. Fortunately, White Zetsu 007 is very motivated. Hearing that there is a task, he immediately patted his chest and promised to complete it, and drilled into the ground with joy. After a while, the entrance to the underground passage opened again. Zhaolin Yifeng, you fool. Sasuke, with a dark face, walked out of the passage and came to Yifeng, stretched out his hand as if to strangle his neck, but finally stopped his action. He took a deep breath and gritted his teeth and said, you will take care of my mother in the future. After the voice fell, he slammed the door and left. Yifeng stood there stupidly, with a confused face. No, what's going on? So, what did you say to your son? In the underground laboratory, Kushina looked at her best friend in a black gauze dress and asked curiously, he was so angry that I think he wanted to strangle the little fool to death. Just tell the truth. Mrs. Masaka blinked and glanced to the side. I didn't expect that little Sasuke would react so much. It's really strange. Hee, tell the truth. Kushina saw that her best friend's expression was a little unnatural, and narrowed her eyes. Mrs. Masaka, have you found that you are a green tea now? Of course, the word green tea was learned from Yifeng. She felt that it was quite appropriate to describe the woman in front of her. Is that so? Mrs. Masaka pointed her finger at her lower lip and tilted her head. Kushina sneered and said, if you jump into the Nanhi River to take a bath like this, everyone in Konoha can drink pure Tigenian. PFF'd. Mrs. Makoto couldn't help but laughed out loud with her hands covering her mouth. You are being led astray by your little fool. Don't change the subject, what did you say? Kushina put her hands on the other's shoulders and said sincerely, we are good friends, right? You are going to hide it from me. To be honest, from the beginning of the impure world reincarnation to being raised in the soul-containing pearl. Mrs. Makoto's cheeks were slightly red, and she whispered, it's just that little Sasuke seems to have a misunderstanding of the process I described. Misunderstanding? He thought that Yifengjun and I had already. Hiss. Kushina took a breath and said with wide eyes, how did you explain this? How could he misunderstand to this extent? And the little fool's age is impossible. Wait, you didn't deliberately induce Sasuke to doubt it. Staring at her best friend, her brows slightly frowned. How is it possible? Do you think I look like that kind of person? Mrs. Makoto puffed up her mouth and pretended to be angry. I didn't originally. Kushina was silent for a moment, and said coldly, but you are so hypocritical, it really makes my suspicion rise sharply. No, then why don't you look at me straight in the eye? Okay, you are a newlywed couple meeting your family, meeting your son, right? What, Kushina, you think too much. Mrs. Makoto's expression suddenly became a little unnatural. I think too much. Kushina grinned and gritted her teeth and said, some people appear to be gentle ladies on the surface, but they are playing very flowery behind the scenes. I am dead, and I am backstabbed by my best friend. Obviously I came first. How is it possible? Do you think I look like that kind of person? Mrs. Makoto puffed up her mouth and pretended to be angry. It's not like that at first. Kushina's mouth twitched, and she said coldly, but you are so hypocritical, which makes my suspicion soar. Okay, you are a newlywed couple meeting their family, meeting their son, right? Hey, Kushina, you think too much. Mrs. Makoto's expression suddenly became a little unnatural. I think too much. Kushina grinned and snorted coldly. Some people are gentle ladies on the surface, but they are playing very colorfully behind the scenes. I am dead, and I am backstabbed by my best friend. Obviously I came first. Kushina. Mrs. Makoto felt that her best friend seemed to be a little angry, so she was ready to apologize. Who knew that the other party changed the subject at this time, and said, how are you going to compensate me? You stabbed me so painfully, don't you need compensation? Mrs. Makoto suddenly realized that she seemed to have fallen into a trap. The best friend in front of her has begun to learn to play routines to cheat people. But now that things have come to this, I can only bite the bullet and say, okay, what compensation do you want? The next morning. Wake up, Master Yifeng. Yifeng was awakened by a gentle female voice in a daze. When he opened his eyes, he saw Uchiha Makoto, a maid in a maid outfit, sitting on him with a red face. With both hands on his chest, he stammered, "Do you want to take a shower first, or eat me first?" Hiss. This scene stimulated Yifeng so much that he almost jumped up from the bed, and said with a dull face, "Mrs. Makoto, what are you doing?" "Master Yifeng, you have to answer first." Mrs. Makoto seemed to be trying hard to suppress her shyness, and her head was about to steam. "Then I'll take a shower first." Yifeng realized that something was wrong and chose a simple one. "Huh." Mrs. Makoto breathed a sigh of relief, and turned into light and drilled into Yifeng's body. Question mark. Before Yifeng could figure out what was going on, he heard Kushina's unbridled laughter in his heart. "Good job. This maid dress I made with spirit particles really suits you." Quote. "Shut up, your compensation is done." Mrs. Makoto's angry voice sounded. "What compensation? Children should not ask about adult matters." Yifeng tried to join the conversation, but was ruthlessly rejected by Kushina. "Okay." Yifeng pouted, dressed up and went to wash. "I'm going to see your eldest son today." Kushina's voice sounded again in the soul beads, saying in a teasing tone, "How about a repeat of history?" "I told you to shut up." Mrs. Makoto seemed even more ashamed and angry. Yifeng could even imagine what she looked like at the moment. Mrs. Wenwan, with a blushing face, was a great sight in the world. At this time, in the Hidden Rain village, outside the Akatsuki base. "Danzo wants to kill me." Quote. Wearing a scratched Konoha forehead guard and a black robe with red clouds, Uchiha Itachi frowned and looked at the masked man in front of him. "He not only wants to kill you, but also wants to attack your brother." The masked man stood on the steps beside Itachi and said indifferently, "The one who took this order is his new subordinate, a very remarkable young man." Itachi's eyes burst into a hint of coldness. Sasuke is his biggest weakness. But he did not get carried away by anger. Instead, he said calmly, "I don't think Danzo has the motive to kill me, but I still thank you for your reminder." Turning around, he was ready to leave. "You should have received the message from Danzo, right?" The masked man did not stop him from leaving, but said in a calm tone, "The name of the contact person is Zhaolin Yifeng, the killer he used to deal with you." Quote. Itachi stopped. It is true that he received a message from Danzo, and the message did say that someone would come to the Hidden Rain village to meet him. So, did Danzo really want to kill him? If he just wanted to kill him, Itachi would have no idea. He was confident that he could still deal with a mere assassin. But if the old man really wanted to attack Sasuke, Itachi would have to fight to the death with him. Of course, all this is based on the premise that what the masked man said is true. Itachi did not trust this cunning guy at all. In his mind, this guy is even more dangerous than Danzo. It's just that they still have a cooperative relationship for the time being, so they didn't tear each other apart. The current situation seems a bit confusing, but Itachi thinks it's not a big problem. As long as he meets the contact person, everything will be clear. Crash. The white paper falling from the sky interrupted Itachi's thoughts. Konan, who was also wearing a black robe with red clouds, showed up. Her light golden pupils glanced at the two people present, and her expression was indifferent. "Pain is going to hold an emergency meeting and invite you two to meet at the base." Emergency meeting? The masked man was confused. "A new member of the Akatsuki organization," Konan said lightly. "Another new member." Not only the masked man, but Itachi was a little bit nervous. Orochimaru was summoned in just 2 days ago, and now there is another one. It was an invitation from Pain himself. Konan explained. "Huh." The masked man narrowed his scarlet right eye and asked in confusion, "Who on earth can interest the leader of the Akatsuki organization?" "His name is Zhaolin Yifeng." Xiaonan did not hide it and gave the name directly. Zhaolin Yifeng. Uchiha Itachi frowned slightly. Why does he feel a little familiar? Wait. He suddenly looked at the masked man beside him. Isn't this the subordinate of Danzo he just mentioned? How come he was invited to join the Akatsuki organization by Pain? The masked man himself was also confused. What the hell is going on? The root members of Konoha were invited to join the Akatsuki. Nagato is so slippery now, he has started to steal Danzo's girlfriend. Something is wrong. The masked man pondered for a moment, always feeling that this matter was a bit too fantastic. Xiaolin Yifeng is a member of the Konoha root and a subordinate valued by Danzo. How could Nagato contact him? Is there a conspiracy here? Is Danzo targeting the Akatsuki organization? He looked at Conan opposite and said in a low voice, according to the information I got, the identity of this new member seems to be not simple. How did Pain know him? In the Land of Waves. Conan didn't seem surprised that he would have such a question, and answered briefly, we received a commission from the Land of Waves some time ago, and therefore got to know Xiaolin Yifeng. This was half true and half false. In fact, she was the only one who accepted the commission at that time. The Land of Waves. The masked man narrowed his eyes. I know what you are worried about. Xiaolin Yifeng is not Danzo's man. Xiaonan said calmly, without sadness or joy. On the contrary, he and Danzo have irreconcilable contradictions. Oh, his teacher at Konoha Orphanage, Yakushi Nono, was killed by Danzo. Is that so? The masked man nodded suddenly. A young man who wanted to avenge his teacher joined the enemy's camp and lurked. During the mission, he was spotted by Pain. The logic makes sense, but the masked man still felt something was wrong in his heart, frowning and said, what ability does he have that Pain can take a fancy to? On this point, Pain has decided to let him show himself at the meeting. Xiaonan lowered his eyes and said in a cold voice, then you too will see it with your own eyes. Well, not all cats and dogs can enter the Akatsuki organization. The masked man said lightly. Ban. Xiaonan's light golden eyes suddenly turned to him, his eyes like a knife. Pain is the leader of Akatsuki, it's not your turn to make decisions. She didn't like this masked man, she didn't like him from the beginning. Now that she got the memory of this world from Yifeng, her disgust for him has turned into sincere hatred. This guy is a pure newborn. Just because he wanted to force Nagato to turn evil, her former companions, Kusuke and Daibatsu, were killed by this man in front of him. If it wasn't for cooperating with her little brother to complete the plan, she would have told him a story of God's power can't hide tears on the spot. The masked man was obviously stunned by the retort. What's wrong with this woman? Did she get fired today? I was obviously speaking from the standpoint of Akatsuki, and I felt that I was not wrong. It's a bit aggrieved, but the masked man chose to endure it for the sake of the big picture. Following Xiaonan into the Akatsuki base. In the dark environment, all members including Pain have arrived. The masked man was wearing a black cloak and standing in a corner. The other members were not surprised. Everyone in Akatsuki knew this mysterious guy now. He neither formed a team with others nor made speeches at meetings. He just showed up from time to make his presence felt. Compared with the mysterious man who did not show his face, the young man in white standing in the field was more interesting to them. Oh, is this the newcomer? Orochimaru, with long hair, spoke first, with a playful expression. He looks like he hasn't graduated from the ninja school yet. I am indeed a student of Konoha Ninja School, Orochimaru-senpai. Yifeng looked at him and smiled gently. Orochimaru was stunned, raised his eyebrows and said, you are a student of Konoha Ninja School, and you know me? Yes. Yifeng nodded gently and smiled. I am also a member of the root under Danzo, and I know a little about the glorious deeds of Senior Orochimaru. So that's how it is. You were favored by Danzo at such a young age. Orochimaru licked his lips and smiled sinisterly. It seems that you do have some good qualities. A member of the root. Kakuzu, who was standing on the left side of Orochimaru, took over the conversation and said lightly, I really want to know why the loyal dog trained by Danzo joined us. Could this kid be a spy of Konoha? Scorpion said coldly. Only those who are mediocre and incompetent will become dogs. Yifeng spoke eloquently, without any stage fright, and said, individuals with independent consciousness will not be born with foolish loyalty. Interesting, this kid is quite talkative. Biwa Juzang grinned, and in his heart he agreed and recognized Yifeng's words. Why did he betray the Hidden Mist village? It's because he couldn't stand the stupid policies issued by the 4th Mizukage, and the group of stupid dogs from the same village who surrounded the Mizukage. Even so, it seems that you are quite confident in your abilities. Kakuzu opened his mouth again, eyes indifferent. Confidence is not something you can say with your mouth. Yifeng looked at Kakuzu and asked sincerely, Senior, I wonder if you are willing to try it yourself. As soon as these words came out, the whole base fell into silence. This newcomer is actually openly provoking Kakuzu. The faces of the members of the Akatsuki organization showed curiosity, surprise and playfulness. Interesting, young people nowadays are really ignorant and fearless. Kakuzu stared at the boy in front of him with his emerald green pupils, and walked into the field. Although your head may not be exchanged for much bounty, your heart, I will take it. Swish. Before he finished speaking, his body rushed towards Yifeng like an arrow from a bow. He raised his fist and smashed it down with a whoosh sound. Bang. At this moment, a cloud of water mist suddenly burst out from where Yifeng was. Ha! The masked man and Itachi opened their Sharingan at the same time, only to find that ordinary 3 Magatama could not see through the fog. It was not until the Mangekyo was activated that the scene in the fog finally came into view. Yifeng put the blade in Kakuzu's hand on his neck, and said with a gentle smile on his face, "Thank you, senior." HMPH. Kakuzu was of course dissatisfied with this result. He would not die if his head was chopped off. He was just about to burst out and let the kid in front of him see what real strength is. That's it. Pain suddenly spoke and said lightly, "Kakuzu, return to your position." Question mark. Kakuzu was stunned and looked at Pain with a stunned expression. "No, buddy, you play like this. Do you need me to repeat it again?" Pain looked at him. Kakuzu took a breath and returned to his original position very aggrieved. He felt like a pervert who was halfway through applying glue when someone grabbed his tool. The feeling of being neither here nor there was simply ecstasy. Orochimaru glanced at Kakuzu, who looked miserable, and said with a gloating smile, "What an incredible illusion, it seems a bit like the mist hidden technique. Mirror flower and water moon, an illusion I created myself." Yifeng said softly, holding the knife in his backhand. Blue light flashed, and the first release was activated on the spot. But no one noticed anything unusual, even though the masked man and Itachi were still using the Mangekyo. Illusion created by myself. Orochimaru frowned, and finally showed a little caution on his face. What a genius, no wonder Chief Pain took notice of him. In fact, I have also dabbled in forbidden techniques, Yifeng said gently. For example, speaking of forbidden techniques, Orochimaru immediately became interested. Choose. 1. Hit Grandma Lee with a big iron hammer. 2. Monkey in a set. 3. Big jar of enema. Nah. Yifeng's heart twitched, but he pretended to be calm and said, "Knock, knock on Grandma Lee's big hammer." The whole audience fell into a strange silence. Congratulations on obtaining the Scorch Release bloodline. Okay, the bloodline is given directly, right? What do I need this thing for? PFF'd, ha 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 ha. In the soul-enhancing bead, Kushina laughed so hard that she leaned forward and backward, saying, "You are talented, you are really talented. Hit Grandma Lee with a big hammer. How did you come up with this idea? Is there really such a forbidden technique?" "There's a ghost," Yifeng's helpless voice sounded. "So, it is indeed a curse." Mrs. Makoto couldn't help laughing, but she was not as straightforward and bold as her best friend. "This curse is really interesting sometimes." Kushina grinned and laughed out loud. "When you are not paying attention, you can always do something that makes people's eyes go dark." "Don't say it, it hurts." Yifeng took a deep breath, still maintaining the image of a gentle and elegant boy on the surface. The smile on Orochimaru's face had completely disappeared at this time, and his dark golden vertical pupils looked coldly at the boy in the field. "Can you show me the forbidden technique you mentioned, Yifeng-kun?" "Sorry, that was actually an insult," Yifeng said frankly without any excuse. The Akatsuki base fell into a strange silence again, and everyone looked at Orochimaru, whose face was completely black. This Konoha rebel, one of the legendary 3 ninjas, was filled with murderous intent at this moment. From childhood to adulthood, no one had ever dared to tease or insult him in person. The boy in front of him was a precedent, and one could imagine how angry Orochimaru was at this time. "Xiaolin Yifeng, please be careful when joking." Xiaonan suddenly spoke at this time, saying lightly. On the surface, she was scolding, but in fact, anyone with a discerning eye could hear that she was defining the matter. Meaning, it's just a little joke. As a senior, you, Orochimaru, wouldn't even have this little tolerance. "Yes, sorry." Yifeng bowed his head respectfully and admitted his mistake. "Hee hee. Orochimaru sneered twice, but finally retracted his killing intention. Something is wrong. The masked man and Itachi who were watching this scene felt something unusual. Conan usually rarely cared about the conflicts and contradictions between the members of the Akatsuki organization, but today she was acting out of character with the boy in front of her. Isn't it too obvious that he is protecting his son? Itachi was fine, he just felt that the situation was a bit strange. The masked man who was familiar with the history of the Akatsuki organization felt like he had seen a ghost. Weird, that's right, he really felt that the boy in front of him was a bit weird. Not only did he appear in his field of vision inexplicably, but he also made Nagato and Conan treat him differently. Why? It stands to reason that since Yahiko's death, these two people should have been completely cemented, with only their own goals and careers in their eyes. But what is the situation today? First, Nagato forced Kakuzu not to take action again, and then Conan personally came out to protect his son. If you don't understand this, you might think that kid is the real leader of Akatsuki. What is the reason? The masked man couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Senior Orochimaru. The young man's voice sounded again at this moment, looking at Orochimaru with a cold face and said, I wonder if you have some experience with the impure world reincarnation technique. Originally, Orochimaru's pupils shrank suddenly and his brows furrowed. Interesting, you actually know the impure world reincarnation. When the forbidden technique that he was interested in was mentioned, the Konoha rebel ninja really put aside his grudges temporarily. Not only do you know, Senior Orochimaru. Yi Feng curved his mouth and said in a gentle voice. It's really surprising. Orochimaru obviously understood the hidden meaning in the other party's words, and smiled grimly. I thought that there was no other successor to that technique except me. What is the impure world reincarnation? Biwa Juzo was confused and couldn't help asking. I've only heard of it. Kakuzu explained, saying lightly, it is rumored that it is a taboo technique developed by the second-generation Hokage Senju Tobirama, which can summon and control the souls of the dead to fight for him. Summon the souls of the dead. Biwa Juzo couldn't help but take a breath. Pain added indifferently, the impure world reincarnation has infinite chakra and immortality. As long as the caster has enough materials, it can theoretically summon an undead army that sweeps the entire ninja world. I see. The masked man seemed to understand why Nagato and Conan valued the boy so much at this time. It's all because of the impure world reincarnation. As long as they win over Kobayashi Yifeng, the caster, the Akatsuki organization can increase its combat power infinitely. Why didn't White Zetsu discover that this boy had such a heaven-defying skill first? If he had known this, he would definitely take the initiative, and the Moon-Eye plan could even be launched in advance. Wait, there should still be a chance now. As long as he can offer a suitable price, it may not be impossible to lure the other party to his camp. The masked man was calculating in his heart, thinking about what reason he should use to approach the other party. What Chief Pain said is exactly what I think. Yi Feng expressed his wonderful imagination in front of all the members of the Akatsuki organization present. I plan to build an army of all Konoha heroes first. All Konoha heroes. Biwa Juzo looked confused. Yes. Yi Feng smiled slightly and said softly. For example, Konoha White Fang, Shunshin Shisui, the first-generation Hokage Senju Hashirama, the second-generation Hokage Senju Tobirama, the fourth-generation Hokage Namikaze Minato. Silence. Listening to these familiar names, everyone present had complicated expressions. It would be very interesting if these heroes of Konoha were to attack the village they once defended with their lives. The silver light reflected from the lenses on his face made it impossible to see Yi Feng's eyes clearly. But all the members of the Akatsuki organization present were chilled by the proposal of the newcomer in front of them, and they looked at him with awe. Devil. This is really the devil's idea. Although these members of the Akatsuki organization also killed and set fire everywhere, living like terrorists. But they never thought of playing with the dead and trampling on their former glory and dignity. It's so scary that even the devil can't do this, right? In the entire base, only the masked man looked at Yifeng with an expression full of admiration, thinking that this child is really suitable to be his partner. Not following the rules, and there is no moral pressure. If the two of them join forces, it will be the most perfect match. Why? He was originally a little annoyed at how Yifeng could be favored by Nagato and Conan, but now he is annoyed with Nagato. This guy is really lucky to have such a talent. But it doesn't matter. The masked man believes that with his sincerity and bargaining chips, he can definitely impress the boy in front of him. Under the mask, a smug smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Payne, who was sitting in the main seat, still maintained an indifferent expression, looking down at Yifeng in the field and said, "It's an interesting plan. Are you ready now?" "I plan to start with the easy and then the difficult." Yifeng nodded lightly, and said solemnly, "Start with those heroes who are not very well known. It seems that you already have a target. Can you tell me who it is?" Orochimaru continued. "Her name is Nohara Lin," Yifeng said without hesitation. The smile on the corner of the masked man's mouth disappeared without a trace at this moment. In the dark secret cave, the masked man who had just returned from the Akatsuki meeting overturned the table in front of him, and all kinds of utensils and decorations were scattered all over the floor. How can there be such an evil and vicious kid in the ninja world who dares to play with the dead? No, you don't seem to be any better, right? You can kill even the teacher and the mistress who care about you without hesitation. In terms of the level of novice, you are probably even higher than him. Black Zetsu standing behind him complained in his heart, but on the surface he was still very patient and comforted. "Calm down, Obito." How to calm down? The masked man, that is, Uchiha Obito, was furious and clenched his fists and said, "That immoral kid is now going to make Rin into a war machine. How can you calm down?" Immoral. Black Zetsu really wanted to laugh when he heard this evaluation. You, a pure novice, are talking about morality at this time. But in the end, Black Zetsu held back and forced himself to suppress his smile and said, "Maybe that kid was just giving an example. What's the point of him summoning Nohara Rin? His combat power is low, and he can only provide a little medical treatment that is not very effective." Here, he suddenly paused. Obito's scarlet right eye stared at it, with a cold murderous intent in his eyes. "Go on." "Very good, you finally calmed down." Black Zetsu tried to change the subject. Without a response, Obito's single eye just stared at it. "Sorry, I didn't mean it." Black Zetsu had to admit defeat for his big plan, and sighed, "What are you going to do?" "Go kill that kid," Obito said coldly. "I don't recommend you to do this." Black Zetsu shook his head and said in a low voice, "That kid is now a favorite of Nagato and Konan. If you attack him, they may find out. This will make our plan fail, and it is obviously not worth the loss. Do you have any other ideas?" Obito's anger still did not fade, but he finally regained some rationality. "If you are worried that Nohara Rin will be used as a weapon of war, you can steal her bones from Konoha yourself." Black Zetsu made a suggestion and said in a hoarse voice, "This way, you can solve the problem once and for all." Rin's bones. Obito's expression under the mask was quite hesitant. Black Zetsu's suggestion is indeed a good one, but it is a bit difficult for Obito to implement it. Nohara Rin is the white moonlight in his heart, and also a mirror. Putting aside this mirror, he can do all kinds of ugly and vicious things. But once he has to face the mirror, he will become painful, cowardly and powerless. Black Zetsu obviously saw his inner thoughts at this time, and immediately felt that his partner was really a bit of a hopeless case. As long as it involves Nohara Rin, he will become hesitant, indecisive, and easily impulsive. In comparison, the young man in white clothes he met today made him feel very surprised. On the surface, he is warm and easygoing, elegant and steady, but in his heart he has abandoned all moral and emotional constraints. He is truly a born villain. But it's a pity. Bloodline determines the limit of growth. Guys without Sharingan are destined to become dust in their own plans in this ninja world. Sighing inwardly, Black Zetsu once again acted as a dog-headed military advisor and gave advice to Obito. "If you don't want to do it yourself, you can leave it to White Zetsu." Obito's eyes lit up, nodded and said, "Very good, that's it. Make sure that Rin's body is intact, and not a single piece of debris can fall." After speaking, he turned and walked towards the depths of the cave. "You heard it all, not a single piece of debris can fall." White Zetsu's original body said lightly. Yes, a White Zetsu clone showed its head from the ground. If you look closely, you can find that there are 3 very secret words, 007, printed on its neck. But whether it is Black Zetsu, White Zetsu's original body or the previous Obito, they will not care about a White Zetsu clone that they use as a tool. At this time, in the woods outside the Hidden Rain village. You stimulate Obito so much, aren't you afraid that he will want to kill you? Xiaonan looked at her little brother and asked with a worried expression. I hope he will want to kill me. Yifeng's mouth corners curved slightly, and he smiled softly. In that case, things will become more interesting. Is your mirror flower and water moon really that magical? Xiaonan was still a little worried. Her impression of her little brother still remained in the period of the Land of Waves. Although Yifeng had some strength at that time, he was about the same as Zabuza, Kurochi Raiga and other famous Jonin. If she were to face a strange opponent like Obito who had opened the Mangekyo, she would probably be powerless. Even though Yifeng had already explained to her even though she possessed the bug-level power of Mirror Flower and Water Moon, Xiaonan's worries did not diminish. The reason was simple. This ability sounded a bit too bizarre to her. It was so bizarre that even though she and Nagato had cooperated with Yifeng to complete the hypnosis ritual for the members of the Akatsuki organization, they still couldn't believe that this ability really existed. Indeed, it's hard to believe it when described in words. Yifeng smiled slightly, looking at the bushes on the side and said, it just so happens that the opportunity for you to witness it with your own eyes has come. Xiaonan followed Yifeng's line of sight and a slender figure with long hair draped over her shoulders came into view. She was wearing the same black-bottomed red cloud robe as her, with thin cheeks and dark golden vertical pupils staring at Yifeng. The person who came was Orochimaru. Senior Orochimaru, you were really punctual, Yifeng said with a smile. You were really bold, Yifeng-kun. Orochimaru smiled mockingly, and said sinisterly, you dare to leave the protection of Pain and Conan and ask me to meet alone. Do you really think I dare not kill you? The terrifying killing intent burst out, and the birds in the forest flapped their wings and fled. Conan stood there in a daze, looking at Orochimaru in front of him as if he was blind and ignored him. With the strength of Orochimaru, it would be easy to kill me. Yifeng still had a gentle smile on his face, and he seemed to be completely unconcerned about the approach of death. But I think you should be more interested in this thing than killing an unknown person like me. As he spoke, a test tube filled with milky white substance appeared in his palm. That's it. Orochimaru's eyes widened and his pupils contracted. Danzo hopes to cooperate with you again to show his sincerity. Yifeng stroked the test tube in his hand and said softly, this is his latest research result. So that's it, are you still Danzo's man after all? Orochimaru showed a look of realization on his face, and smiled sinisterly, if Pain and Conan knew what you are doing now, guess what would happen? Being able to get Danzo's latest research results, this is obviously the confidant of the confidant. So, everything the boy said in the Akatsuki organization was to gain trust. What a scary kid. Senior Orochimaru, are you going to report me? Yifeng smiled indifferently. If Danzo really wants to cooperate with me sincerely, I would be happy to do so. Orochimaru grinned and chuckled softly, it's just a pity that he sent a guy like you to me. What does Senior Orochimaru mean? Yifeng pretended not to understand and showed a puzzled expression. You are not a nobody, Yifeng-kun. Orochimaru licked his lips and rushed forward. If you are given time, you will definitely grow to be a being that surpasses me, right? It's just a pity that I hate people who are similar to me. He grabbed Yifeng's throat with one hand and lifted him up in the air. So that's how it is. Senior Orochimaru actually hates me. Suddenly, Yifeng's voice sounded strangely behind Orochimaru. What? Orochimaru turned his head in astonishment and saw a boy wearing black framed glasses standing under the treetops with a smile on his face. The falling sunlight shone on him, and the lenses reflected an orange-red light. He looked at the person he had caught in his hand, wearing the uniform of the Akatsuki organization, and his scarlet eyes were cold. Orochimaru, what do you mean by this? Uchiha Itachi. Orochimaru was dumbfounded, how could this happen? He was clearly holding a boy in white, how could he suddenly turn into a living person? In fact, Itachi was also a little confused at this time. He came to Zhaolin Yifeng to ask whether Danzo really wanted to attack his brother, but as soon as he showed up, he saw Orochimaru rushing towards him. With his strength, he could completely dodge. But at that moment, his body was firmly bound by some strange force. When he came back to his senses again, he was already being held in the air by Orochimaru's neck. He was still saying that he hated people who were similar to him. Itachi felt speechless. How the hell was he similar to you? Was it because we were both rebels from Konoha? Ha, hee hee. Orochimaru seemed to understand something and looked at Yifeng behind him. I am becoming more and more interested in you, Yifeng-kun. He was fooled. Not only was he fooled, but Uchiha Itachi in front of him was also fooled. This kid's ability was not as simple as he showed. He could actually launch this level of illusion silently. Sharingan. Orochimaru now urgently wanted to get Sharingan. Only with Sharingan would he not be so passive when facing illusion. As for why Uchiha Itachi, who had Sharingan, was also fooled, it was obviously because he was not capable enough. Only with his own ability plus Sharingan could he become the strongest. Thinking of this, Orochimaru decisively stretched out his spare left hand and scratched towards Itachi's eyes. Looking at the palm of Orochimaru's attack, the three Magatama in Itachi's pupils turned, and his lips uttered softly, magic shackles and hanging technique. Buzz. The air in front of him shook, and the scene suddenly changed. A space shrouded in blood. Uchiha Itachi, who was originally held in Orochimaru's hand, appeared several meters away, and his scarlet eyes stared at him coldly. This is. Orochimaru looked down at his body, as if he was being executed and inserted with huge metal nails. At this time, Orochimaru suddenly realized that he had always underestimated the rebel ninja from the same village in front of him. Well, the legendary three ninjas actually fell into illusions twice in a day. This made Orochimaru's mentality a little broken, and he directly broke free from the restraints at the cost of an arm. He didn't even have time to say anything harsh, and used Earth Escape to stay away from this place of right and wrong. What a beautiful counterattack, Mr. Itachi! Yifeng exclaimed, is this the power of the Sharingan? Shaolin Yifeng. Uchiha Itachi turned his scarlet eyes to him, and said indifferently, are you now a subordinate of Shimura Danzo or a member of Akatsuki? I don't think there is any conflict between these two identities, Mr. Itachi. Yifeng smiled and said gently, for me, whether it is a subordinate of Danzo or a member of Akatsuki, it is just a way to achieve the goal. Itachi was stunned, and his pupils shrank. He obviously understood the deep meaning of Yifeng's words, and that's why he was shocked. This young man in front of him actually regarded the root and Akatsuki as stepping stones. Just to achieve a certain goal of his own, and regarded them as tools that can be used. Wait, is it possible that he has deliberately arranged to bring himself here now? Deliberately let himself conflict with Orochimaru, wanting to reap the benefits. Oh, it seems you've discovered me. Yifeng seemed to see through the other person's inner thoughts at this moment, and said with a sigh, I originally thought that with the strength of Orochimaru, even if I couldn't kill you, I could still fight with Mr. Itachi so that I could easily complete the task. Itachi's pupils shrank, and he said coldly, did Danzo ask you to kill me? In fact, he didn't care about himself, but his brother. The remnants of Uchiha shouldn't live in the world, this is what Mr. Danzo said. Yifeng didn't hide it, and said very frankly, it's a pity that it's a bit difficult for me to kill you alone. It seems that I can only choose a simpler target, starting with Uchiha Sasuke. Dang, the long sword in Yifeng's hand collided with Itachi's kunai, and sparks flew. Mr. Itachi, are you angry? Yifeng curled his lips and said in a gentle tone, I heard from Sasuke himself that you killed your parents and clansmen to test your own tolerance. In that case, it shouldn't matter if it's just a brother. Give up the idea of attacking Sasuke. Itachi's eyes turned with a Magatama, and his expression was cold. What if I refuse? Yifeng asked with a smile. I will let you die here. The three Magatama in Itachi's eyes changed into a windmill shape, and he whispered mercilessly, Amaterasu. Boom. Black flames rose on Yifeng's body and instantly spread all over his body. But unexpectedly, Yifeng's face not only did not show the slightest pain, but smiled strangely at Itachi. What? Uchiha Itachi just realized that something was wrong, and a blade suddenly flashed behind him. Puff. Blood splattered and spread in the air. Uchiha Itachi looked at the knife scar on his shoulder, and his face showed an unbelievable expression. Did you dodge at the critical moment? Yifeng, who appeared behind him, shook off the blood on the blade and smiled and praised, Mr. Itachi is worthy of his name. He is very responsive. The Yifeng who was originally set on fire by Amaterasu also turned into a few wisps of smoke and dust at this time. Itachi stared at the other party. His expression was so surprised that he couldn't even speak. What is that? What just happened? Illusion. Stand. What kind of illusion and stand can even affect the Mangekyo? This is incredible. Did you just tell me to give up attacking Sasuke? Yifeng took out a photo from his arms and threw it directly to the other party. I'm so sorry, that's something that has already happened. Something that has already happened. Itachi was stunned and his body couldn't help but tremble. Could it be that Sasuke has already? His eyes subconsciously looked at the photo, and his expression suddenly became very dull. In the photo, Uchiha Sasuke, his brother, was actually kneeling on the ground in a black gothic Lolita dress, with two ponytails on his head, looking at the camera with shame and anger. At this moment, Itachi's brain began to be confused. This is how he attacked. That's all for today, Mr. Itachi. Yifeng turned around and said softly, I'm very happy to be able to communicate with you face to face. Wait, Zhaolin Yifeng. Uchiha Itachi tried to call him and shouted, tell me, what did you do to Sasuke? Don't be nervous, it's just a friendly exchange between classmates. Yifeng smiled and looked at Xiaonan on the side. Let's go, Sister Nan. Xiaonan nodded gently, and looked at Itachi, who had never paid attention to her from beginning to end, with a complicated look in her eyes. Now she finally understood why her little brother was so confident. Even Itachi, who had the Mangekyo Sharingan, could be played like a monkey. There was probably nothing in the ninja world that could hurt him. Zhaolin Yifeng, I told you to stop. Uchiha Itachi was almost going crazy at this time. In order to keep Yifeng, he quickly began to make seals with his hands. Fire style. Great Dragon Fire Technique. A huge fire dragon head spewed out and bombarded Yifeng directly. The young man in white did not turn around, still with his back to Uchiha Itachi, and said softly, water style, water clear wave. Boom. Dozens of rotating water columns rushed out of the ground, forming a water wall several feet high. Puff. The fire dragon head hit the water column and was extinguished instantly. Surrounded by mist, Uchiha Itachi showed an incredible expression on his face. He saw clearly that the boy did not make any seals at all. And the water clear wave technique, even if it is performed, it should only have one water column, right? But Zhaolin Yifeng, this guy, actually summoned a water wall. And in this waterless environment, what kind of monster is this boy? Chapter 51. Hidden Rain Village, High Tower. Nagato, with short red hair, was reading the book, Reconstruction Plan of Hidden Rain Village, with great interest, until Konan pushed the door open and entered the room. Is everything settled? Nagato put down the book and looked up and asked. Well, remove Orochimaru from the organization. Konan nodded and said softly, he probably won't come back. Nagato was stunned, nodded slightly and said, okay. Yifeng's ability of Mirror Flower and Water Moon. Is it as powerful as he said? I think it's actually more outrageous than he said, and it's not just Mirror Flower and Water Moon. Konan showed a complicated expression and told everything that happened in the woods before. Nagato, now that you have fully recovered, can you do that? Are you kidding? Nagato took a breath and said in disbelief. The seal released more than a dozen water waves to form a water wall. Is this still the ninjutsu I understand? I can't understand it either, but this is the fact that appeared in front of me. Konan said lightly. What an incredible child. Nagato sighed and said, but it's good this way. We don't need to worry about his safety anymore. In this way, we can devote ourselves to building Yuyin. Xiaonan, are you listening? Halfway through his words, Nagato suddenly found that his friend's expression was a little strange. Yes, I'm listening. Xiaonan nodded gently, but it was like a mechanical subconscious reply. The corners of Nagato's mouth twitched slightly, and he whispered, then what did I just say? Continue to eat roasted sweet potatoes tonight. Xiaonan responded. ... Nagato took a breath and couldn't help but complain fiercely. I think you look like a sweet potato now. Ahem. Xiaonan finally woke up at this time and turned his face away embarrassedly. Sorry, I was a little distracted just now. Thinking about your brother again, right? Nagato said helplessly. He is still so young, hiding in Konoha alone without anyone to take care of him. Xiaonan sighed. Could it be that my friend wants to go to Konoha to be a nanny for that child? Nagato raised his eyebrows, with a strange expression. Have you ever thought about what you would do if you leave the Hidden Rain village? Oh, I forgot that I am a healthy person now. Although I am still sitting in a wheelchair, it is also for Obito and Zetsu to see. But even if he can take care of himself, what about the construction of the Hidden Rain village? After a long silence, Nagato said faintly, Conan, now I have a very important question I hope you can answer for me. What? Conan's beautiful light golden eyes blinked. Do you have any special interest in boys of that age? Nagato considered his tone and asked cautiously, in layman's terms, it is Shotokan. Conan was stunned, frowned and said, do you suspect I am a pervert? No, I just. Nagato wanted to explain in a panic. In my eyes, only Yifang is special. Xiaonan glanced at him and turned to leave the tower. So, you didn't deny that you were a Shotokan at all, right? Nagato looked at her leaving back, and his expression finally showed that he couldn't hold back his pain. At this time, at the root of Konoha. What did you say, Orochimaru? Danzo, who was sitting on the high platform, stared at him, and said with a surprised expression on his face, Orochimaru is also in that Akatsuki organization. Yes, Lord Danzo. Yifang nodded solemnly. Danzo lowered his head and was silent for a long time, then took a deep breath and said, if Orochimaru was involved, it's not your fault that you failed to complete the task. The remnants of the Uchiha family, they are lucky this time. This Danzo really thinks he is a big shot. Uchiha Itachi wants to kill him, right? Kushina's sarcastic voice sounded. It's normal, he hasn't seen Itachi's full strength. Yifang smiled softly and comforted. In Danzo's opinion, Orochimaru's strength is obviously much stronger than Uchiha Itachi. The limitations of the older generation. Kushina sighed. Before she got the memory of this world, she actually thought that Orochimaru was obviously stronger. The title of the legendary Sannin was fought out in a sea of blood and corpses. Who would have thought that a being like Orochimaru could not even resist the illusion of the Sharingan? Mrs. Makoto did not participate in the conversation between the two, but listened quietly in the soul orb. She had very complicated feelings about Itachi, her eldest son. There was no hatred or anger towards him, nor sympathy for his current situation, only a deep sadness lingering in her heart. Xiaolin Yifang. Danzo on the high platform spoke again, without sadness or joy. Since Orochimaru knew that you were my man, didn't he say anything to you? Yes. Yifeng nodded and said respectfully, Senior Orochimaru asked me to tell you that I hope to have the opportunity to cooperate with you again. Cooperation. Danzo sneered and said coldly, as a traitor of Konoha, he is no longer qualified. What is he, Danzo, researching now? It is the super ninja potion. And that idiot Orochimaru must still be holding on to the discarded waste as a treasure. The resources they have now are not equal, so what kind of cooperation is there? The subordinate thinks so too. Yifeng said, taking out a tube of reagent from his pocket and handing it to Danzo. But before leaving, Senior Orochimaru asked me to hand this over to you. This is. Danzo's expression at this moment is exactly the same as that of Orochimaru before, and he is even more fanatical than Orochimaru. According to Senior Orochimaru, this is his latest achievement. Yifeng said with his head down. Did Orochimaru get this too? Danzo stared at the milky white substance in the test tube, and had to admit that the quality of this thing was a bit stronger than what he had purified now. Had to admit it. Compared to his stupid subordinates, Orochimaru's research level was indeed much higher. Calculated in this way, it was not a loss to cooperate with him. Thinking so in his heart, Danzo lowered his eyes and said, Shaolin Yifeng, you did a good job this time. Not only did you do nothing wrong, but you also made a contribution. Everything is for Konoha, Yifeng said modestly. That's right, everything we do now is for Konoha. Danzo nodded with satisfaction, and said lightly, Shaolin Yifeng, do you know what is in it? Quote. As the creator of the Super Ninja Potion, he was forced to listen to Danzo's 10-minute popular science lecture. Only then did he leave the root base with a large bag of various scrolls given by the other party. Danzo-sama, what a good leader. Yifeng glanced at the contents of the scroll and sighed. Knowing that I am good at illusion and swordsmanship, he gave me a bunch of scrolls of Earth Escape and Lightning Escape. Ha 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 ha. Kushina couldn't help laughing like thunder, and teased, aren't you going to do something to repay your kindness? Indeed, so I'm going to the Hokage building now. Yi Feng nodded seriously, and said seriously, report all the hard research that Danzo-sama has done for Konoha over the years to Sarutobi Hiruzen. Kushina was stunned. This operation. Hokage's office. Looking at the plan for cultivating Hashirama cells in his hand, Hokage consultant Mitokado En showed an expression of disbelief and astonishment on his face, saying, Danzo actually. What a fool. Udatane Kaharu, who is also a consultant, was also furious, and said with cold eyes, Danzo dared to desecrate the corpse of the first generation, which is too much. In fact, in addition to this plan, the table in the Hokage's office also has Sharingan and Hashirama cell fusion experiment, Hashirama cell transplant body record, and so on. A variety of folders are stacked up. As the Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen did not rush to comment on the dirty things done by his old friend. He looked at the boy not far away and said, you did a good job, Yi Feng. Thanks to you, otherwise we would still be kept in the dark by Danzo's actions. This is what I should do, Hokage. Yi Feng lowered his head with a humble look. How did you get this evidence, young man? Udatane Kaharu looked at him at this time, frowning and saying, didn't Danzo notice it? Danzo wants me to participate in his new experimental plan. Yi Feng pretended to have a complicated expression on his face, and said in a tangled tone, these materials are the reference books he prepared for me. New experimental plan. He doesn't even plan to stop yet. Mitomono En and Udatane Kaharu were shocked. Yi Feng, do you know what Danzo's new experimental plan is? Sarutobi Hiruzen asked in a low voice. Choose. 1. Perform the little boy-girl transformation technique on Sarutobi Hiruzen on the spot. 2. Expose your lower abdomen and show everyone present the physical imprint experiment that Danzo has planted on you. 3. Take out a copy of the proposal for the increase of male conscience in the whole ninja world from your pocket and let them see the evil of Danzo. Hiss. Looking at the option interface that suddenly popped up in front of him, Yi Feng's expression almost couldn't hold back. What the hell are these options? Transformation of a little boy-girl. Can Sarutobi Hiruzen, whose face looks like a blooming chrysanthemum when he smiles, be transformed into a little boy-girl? Even if he is transformed, he should be an old boy-girl, right? I can't think about it anymore, I'm going to have a picture in my mind. Yi Feng took a deep breath and strangled his dangerous thoughts in the cradle. As for the second one, he skipped it without a doubt. What the hell is the flesh branding experiment? This system is really inhuman. Using the elimination method to remove the first two items, only the last one is left. Yi Feng reached into his pocket with a calm face, and as expected, he took out a document. Question mark. Sarutobi Hiruzen took the document and glanced at it roughly, and a big question mark appeared on his head. He lowered his head and read it again in detail, and the whole person was struck by lightning. Congratulations on obtaining the Ice Shield bloodline. Can you not give up the reward, and not send any more tasks? Yi Feng sighed deeply. This BYD system always pops up to show its presence when he is caught off guard. It is really newborn. Hiruzen, what's going on? What is the evil plan? The two consultants, Kaharu Udatane and En Mitokado, were a little anxious. The expression of their old friend was obviously not right. After being stunned for a long time, Sarutobi Hiruzen gradually recovered. With a twitching cheek, he put the document in his hand on the table, took a deep puff of cigarette and said, you can see it for yourself. The two consultants were very curious and leaned over to take a look, and immediately fell into a petrified state of stagnation. Yi Feng, you've worked hard today. Sarutobi Hiruzen ignored his two friends and looked directly at the boy in front of him and said, don't tell anyone about these secrets about Danzo for the time being. Yes. Yi Feng's eyes revealed a trace of guilt, which was caught by Sarutobi Hiruzen. Sighing slightly, the third Hokage comforted him like a kind old man with an enlightening tone. Don't think too much, Yi Feng. You are a good child, I know you care about Danzo's cultivation of you. Hokage, don't explain to me, I can understand you. What you are doing now is not betrayal, but redemption. Not only redeeming yourself, but also redeeming Danzo who cultivated you. If you let him go on like this, can you imagine how many innocent families will be implicated and harmed? Yes. Yifeng seemed to have figured it out and nodded gently. Go back and have a good rest. Sarutobi Hiruzen patted his shoulder and said with a smile, go out with your good friends and relax. I promise that from today on, Danzo and the people from the route will not disturb you anymore. Thank you, Hokage. Yifeng thanked him sincerely, and then turned and left. What a good boy, he still considers him even though he was forced into this by Danzo. Udatain Kaharu had regained his composure at this time, and looked at Yifeng's departing back and exclaimed. Yes. Sarutobi Hiruzen nodded in agreement, and said, I plan to find him a good teacher who can make the most of his talents. Do you have a candidate? Udatain Kaharu asked. Well, how about Kakashi? Sarutobi Hiruzen suggested. Okay, let him try it first. Udatain Kaharu first approved his friend's proposal, and then turned his eyes to the proposal for enlarging the conscience of all ninja men on the desk, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch twice. I really don't understand what Danzo is thinking. What is the purpose of his plan? Enlarge the conscience of all men in the ninja world, and then what? What's the point of this thing? Sarutobi Hiruzen also frowned and shook his head. It was hard to imagine the mental state of his old friend when he made this plan. Could he be crazy? He wanted to make himself more confident. Mito Kato-en suddenly spoke with a firm expression. For confidence, Udatain Kaharu stared with a confused look on his face. You don't know that Danzo has always been very inferior in his heart. Mito Kato-en sighed and talked freely. He was not injured at all, but why did he always wear bandages? Why did he always refuse every time there was a grand ceremony in Konoha? Have you thought about the deep reasons behind this? It's all because of inferiority. Sarutobi Hiruzen continued. Yes, Mito Kato-en nodded and looked at his old friend. The source of his inferiority complex actually started when you became the Hokage, Hiruzen. Over the years, he has been constantly comparing himself with you, but you have surpassed him in every aspect. Deeply affected by the pain accumulated over the years, he probably came up with such an extreme plan. But what does an increased conscience have to do with self-confidence? Udatain Kaharu asked in confusion. If every man's conscience becomes the same as a woman's, and he is the only normal person. Mito Kato-en paused here and said with a serious expression, then, it's no surprise that he will become the most confident man in the entire ninja world. Is that so? Sarutobi Hiruzen showed a look of realization on his face. Danzo, this guy, really has good intentions. Udatain Kaharu exclaimed. Ha ha ha, my god. Kushina in the underground base looked at this scene and couldn't laugh anymore. She slapped Yifeng's thigh and said, what kind of alien brain circuits are these people, and they actually believed such a ridiculous plan. Kushina, be gentle. Mrs. Misakato, who was standing beside them, patted her best friend's shoulder and reminded her, Yifeng is still a child. Oh, what a virtuous wife. Kushina, who was sitting on Yifeng's lap, looked at her with a playful expression and teased, you feel bad for hitting him, right? Then I'm going to hit him. As she spoke, she raised her hand and slapped Yifeng's thigh hard again. In fact, she was not in a physical state at all, and even if she used force, it was only a slight touch. What do you mean by feeling bad or not? Mrs. Misakato's cheeks flushed, and she turned her face away and said, I just think that you are inappropriate and immoral. Then what kind of behavior is not immoral? Kushina raised her hand and touched her chin, her tone frivolous. Wear a maid outfit in the morning and give the master a wake-up call. Puff. Mrs. Misakato's face suddenly burned, and a strong sense of shame arose in her heart. I won't tell you yet. I'll go see how Shisui's hollow state is. She slipped out of the laboratory as if she was escaping. Huh, is that all? Looking at her best friend's back as she left, Kushina sneered. You two, this. Yifeng couldn't comment on this. You want to start a new life, but you can't let go of the shackles of the past. Kushina shook her head and sighed, this won't work. I'm helping her, don't you understand what I mean? I don't understand. Yifeng shook his head. Kushina pinched his cheeks in displeasure and snorted, you've got all the benefits, and you're still pretending to be a fool with me. I think it's better to let things take their own course. Yifeng suggested. That won't work. Kushina let go of her hand and looked back at the monitor. With Makoto's personality, How long will it take to let things take their own course? Now that I'm trapped, she's still standing on the shore watching. Doesn't that make me look really immoral? Quote. Yifeng laughed awkwardly and said sincerely, that must not be the case. It was all because of my seduction. PFF'd. Kushina immediately made him laugh and reached out to touch Yifeng's cheek. So how did you seduce him, a little kid who hasn't even grown all his hair? Personal attack. But I have to admit that you are really attractive to girls. That curse is probably not just a curse. It may have transformed you into a succubus in the ninja world, right? God. Ha ha ha. Looking at Yifeng's constipated expression, Kushina hugged his neck and couldn't help laughing. At this time, Sarutobi Hiruzen and others in the monitor also began to make a final summary of Danzo's handling. Let's talk to him first and persuade him to give up this unrealistic idea. Mito Kato Yan said softly. Just talk. Kaharu Udatane was obviously not satisfied with this solution, and frowned, saying, he has done such a thing, he should at least be locked up first. Kaharu, that is Danzo after all. Mito Kato En explained, with a sincere face, we are actually somewhat responsible for his current situation. This. Kaharu Udatane was obviously persuaded, and her expression became a little hesitant. How about confinement? Sarutobi Hiruzen suggested, let him reflect at home for a while and calm down. Okay, this is a good suggestion. I agree. The two consultants nodded in unison. No, they are joking, right? Kushina was stunned by this solution, her eyes widened. That's it. Quote. Stealing the remains of the first Hokage, inhumane human experiments, wantonly killing fellow ninjas, attempting to reform the conscience of all males in the ninja world. Such a series of heinous acts, just a light confinement. It's normal, after all, that's their good friend Danzo. Yifeng didn't feel any surprise, and said with a sneer on his face, it's an internal conflict among the rulers of Konoha, and it's not appropriate to fight and kill. Really? Kushina understood what he meant, took a deep breath and said, why did Minato and I fight to the death to stop Kurama? It feels meaningless. This village is so dark that it makes people feel chilling. That's different. You were trying to protect the people of Konoha at that time. Yifeng shook his head and smiled. The people are innocent after all. Quote. Yifeng's words finally brought some comfort to Kushina, but her mood did not improve much at the moment. The lives of so many innocent people are just a string of simple numbers in the eyes of these Konoha high-level officials. They are not even as good as a hair of their friend Danzo. Anyone with a conscience will feel angry when seeing this scene. Now she finally understood why Yifeng said that only by completely overthrowing the old system can the ninja world be reborn. Because as long as these old guys are still in high positions, there will be no equality in the ninja world. In fact, from our point of view, they are actually beneficial to us. Yifeng smiled slightly. Is it still beneficial? Kushina looked confused. Their enemies are my heroes. Yifeng said lightly, the existence of Konoha F4 is the biggest cancer of Konoha. But for those of us who are looking forward to the destruction of the old system, they are indeed the best comrades and friends. The more corrupt and vicious they are, the closer the date of our victory will be. Your statement seems to be true. Kushina was stunned and nodded thoughtfully. So I have always been grateful to Danzo and Hokage. Yifeng curled his lips and chuckled, I treat them as my relatives, close friends, brothers and good friends. You are such a rogue. Kushina slapped him and scolded him with a smile, you sold them out right away. Is this how you treat your friends? Well, friends can't be compared to good brothers after all. I think you are courting death. Kushina grabbed his cheeks with a face full of shame and anger and began to pull them out. Wrong, wrong. Yifeng pretended to be in pain and began to beg for mercy. Kushina, Lin is awake. Mrs. Makoto's reappearance interrupted the intimate interaction between the two. HMPH, I'll spare you this time. Kushina jumped off Yifeng's legs, walked to her best friend and patted her hips. My exclusive throne is temporarily reserved for you, don't let me down. What exclusive throne? I don't understand what you are saying at all. Mrs. Masaka's face was very red and her mouth was very hard, but her eyes could not help but glance at Yifeng's legs. She was thinking whether she should really break through herself. Just at this time, a slightly jubilant voice sounded from the monitor, Chief, are you home? The person who came was White Zetsu 007. It was obvious that it had mastered the way to call Yifeng from the hut. Mrs. Masaka's eyes flashed with a trace of annoyance. This white Zetsu came at the wrong time. But she didn't say anything, but left the laboratory very sensibly. What Obito wants is in the pond in the backyard of the hut. Yifeng didn't show up to meet the other party, but spoke directly through the communicator. In the pond, White Zetsu 007 scratched his head and walked into the backyard of the hut according to the route Yifeng said. The water in the pool was very clear, and there were 2 green toads, one big and one small, chasing and playing in it. Then, that leader, White Zetsu 07's expression was a little stiff, wondering if his leader had made a mistake. You just need to send them back to Obito. Yifeng's gentle voice sounded, and he said lightly, tell him that the small toad is Nohara Lin's head, and the big one is her body. Ah, Dark Cave. Obito, wearing a yellow mask with black stripes, paced back and forth on the steps, looking a little anxious. Don't worry, A2. Seeing this, a white Zetsu standing at the bottom of the steps couldn't help but let out a sharp laugh, and slowly said, I believe that you will be able to meet your beloved Lin again soon. This white Zetsu looks very unusual, its entire face is twisted in a spiral shape. The body lines are completely different from other white Zetsu, and it is an elite monster, visible to the naked eye. This thing is Uzumaki White Zetsu, or you can call it a Fae. Unlike the clones of the White Zetsu body, it was truly created by Uchiha Madara through the Outer Path Demon statue combined with Hashirama's chakra. Its strength is far superior to that of the White Zetsu body, and its personality is more anthropomorphic than that of the White Zetsu. Its original intention was to comfort Obito, but it didn't expect that its flattery would hit the horse's leg. The masked man's eyes suddenly turned to it, and he vented his emotions. How many times have I told you not to call me that ridiculous name again? But, Fei felt a little aggrieved. This name was clearly what he had been using since he first met Obito. No buts, Obito said in a cold and condescending voice. I am no longer the foolish boy you knew at the beginning. Don't talk to me in such a slick tone. Fei opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but was stopped by Black Zetsu who was on White Zetsu. Say less. Before seeing the corpse of Nohara Rin, this guy was a powder keg. Do we really have no friendship? Fei fell into silence, and couldn't help but think of what the White Zetsu clone who called himself 007 said to him. In the eyes of Uchiha Madara, Obito, White Zetsu's original body and Black Zetsu, they are just dispensable tools. Even if they die for them, they won't get a single tear. At that time, Fei did not think deeply, but just thought that this 007 was very thoughtful and interesting. It was not until now that it suddenly woke up. 007 was right. Fei was a little discouraged, and stepped aside with his head down. Neither the Black and White Zetsu nor Obito cared about its behavior. In their eyes, this whirlpool-faced Fei has always been a model of psychopath. When Uchiha Madara was still alive, he was pissed off by it several times. No matter what kind of abnormal things this guy does, it is not surprising. Hello, everyone. A white Zetsu head suddenly emerged from the ground and greeted everyone, I'm back. Obito's eyes lit up and he quickly said, is it done? Well, 2 toads were created. White Zetsu 007 blurted out. What? Obito obviously didn't hear it clearly. I mean, it's done. White Zetsu 007 looked a little nervous and slowly emerged from the ground. The body of Miss Lin is here with me. It had never seen the power of the Mirror Flower and Water Moon, but in order to complete the task assigned by the leader, it still appeared in front of Obito. Rin. Obito didn't care what it said at all, and rushed forward to hug the 2 toads, one big and one small, in the arms of White Zetsu 007. Very hard, the 2 toads were squeezed so hard that their eyes rolled back. This. White Zetsu 007 was stunned by the scene in front of him, and he hadn't explained it according to the leader's words yet. Looking around, he found that it was not only Obito himself. Even Black and White Zetsu looked at him holding the 2 toads without showing any abnormality. My God, is this what the leader said? Everything is under control. Too domineering. However, there is an exception among the people present, Uzumaki White Zetsu, Afe. When attending the Akatsuki organization meeting, Black and White Zetsu and Obito both appeared, and they saw the liberation ceremony of Mirror Flower and Water Moon with their own eyes. Ah Fei didn't follow him, but he escaped. At this moment, he looked at Obito holding the toad, warm and affectionate, and tilted his head for a moment, not quite understanding. Is that toad Nohara Rin? A2, are you? Ah Fei opened his mouth to correct, but was stared at by Obito's scarlet eyes. I say again, don't use that stupid name again. His tone was cold, and Ah Fei could even feel that the other party had murderous intentions. I treated him as a friend, but he really wanted to kill me. Okay, thinking carefully, I helped Madara-sama to deceive him, so it's fair. Ah Fei scratched his head, but still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. To be precise, it was very aggrieved. It was more aggrieved than when he was caught peeping at Madara-sama's poop. I want to be alone with Rin for a while, and we'll talk about other things later. Obito said this coldly, holding the two toads in his arms, and walked away go deep into the cave. Okay. Black and White Zetsu nodded and burrowed into the soil. They are not interested in watching such boring and sad dramas. It is better to go and get more information. Ah Fei sighed and was about to turn around and leave, and saw the White Zetsu who called himself 007, and a few younger brothers who were also White Zetsu clones quietly followed Obito into the inner room. Obito, who was immersed in the reunion with his beloved girl, obviously did not notice this. After entering the inner room, he put the two toads on his bed and rubbed their skin like a lover. Everyone sees it now. Is my new leader a god? White Zetsu 007 squatted underground, pointed at the scene in front of him and said proudly, a mere Mangekyo Sharingan is still being fooled. Indeed, you are right. One of the White Zetsu clones nodded in agreement and changed the subject. But I am more concerned about the 5 social insurances and 1 housing fund. Are they really there? HMPH. White Zetsu 007 snorted and dug a hole in his chest to take out a pair of brand new sunglasses. See, this is the reward for completing the task before. Hiss. The White Zetsu clones around him took a deep breath, with envy visible on their faces. They would never dare to think of such a thing in their lives, even if they were rewarded for completing the task. And it's not just 5 social insurances and 1 housing fund. White Zetsu 007 looked around, grinned and said lightly, my leader also said. If all compatriots are willing to join, there will be 2 days off every week. Think about it, how many years have you not had a rest? But, another White Zetsu clone gritted his teeth and said angrily, compared with this, Uchiha Madara and Black and White Zetsu are really not human. They only know how to order us around, and don't care about our thoughts and opinions at all. And Obito is also a fool. A voice of agreement sounded next to it, complaining, I just wanted to verify with him how humans fart, and he planted me in the field for a whole week. In that case, let's just follow 007. The first White Zetsu clone suggested. Not with me. White Zetsu 007 shook his head and said solemnly, I am following my leader. He is our beacon, the dawn that illuminates the entire ninja world. 007, you are really good now. The White Zetsu clone squatting next to it said with envy. Read more books and learn more. White Zetsu 007 patted its shoulder and said seriously, only in this way can you become a useful White Zetsu, instead of being mediocre like the original body. And the leader promised me. If we complete the task well enough, he will choose a White Zetsu from among us to be the toilet guard. What, toilet guard? Doesn't that mean that you can study human feces every day? The enthusiasm of the White Zetsu clones was fully mobilized, and they looked at 007 with burning eyes. Humph, a bunch of trash. A cold voice suddenly sounded, and all the clones, including White Zetsu 007, looked in the direction of the voice. An unusually whirlpool-faced Bai Zetsu looked at them with his arms folded across his chest, his attitude very contemptuous. How dare you dare to try to get your hands on that honor? The restroom guard is destined to be mine. The night was shrouded, and the sky was full of stars. Hey, are you the leader that 007 mentioned? The whirlpool-faced Baiju looked at the half-grown man in front of him and stretched out his hand to compare his height. You are still a little dwarf, and you don't look that good. Fei, you guy. Hearing that the other party dared to disrespect his own leader, Baiju 007 was immediately furious. No need to be like this, 007. Yi Feng raised his hand to stop the other party, and said with a gentle expression, I believe Mr. A-Fei has no ill intentions, but I am a little nervous when we first meet. Nervous, nervous. A-Fei snorted lightly, put his hands on his waist and said, "What a joke, how could I be nervous?" As he spoke, his body shook slightly uncontrollably. Yi Feng and Bai Ju 007 subconsciously looked at his legs, which were shaking like a newborn deer. In short, Ah-Fei seemed to know that he had embarrassed himself, and quickly changed the subject. "I came here today just to ask you something in person. Please speak." Yi Feng didn't care about his attitude, and his expression was still gentle. "If we are willing to switch to your side, 5 social insurances and 1 housing fund, and 2 days off a week, is it true? Not only that, but there are also 2 weeks of paid vacation every year." Chief. Ah-Fei knelt on one knee on the spot and clasped his hands. "From today on, Ah-Fei will follow you. Who is Uchiha Madara? I don't know him at all." "Hurry up, the chief doesn't like kneeling." White Zetsu 007 pulled it up from the ground, and also patted the mud on its knees very considerately. "I have received Mr. A-Fei's kindness." Yi Feng nodded with a smile and said lightly, "But there is a question that makes me very curious. You choose to stand on our side now. Aren't you afraid that the goddess on the moon will be angry?" "Oh, the leader really knows a lot about us." A-Fei scratched his head and said frankly, "Lord Kagaya is very powerful, but I have decided to be a person with my own ideas." What's more? Yi Feng asked in confusion. "Even if Lord Kagaya really breaks the seal, isn't there the leader in front of him?" A-Fei spread his hands. Okay, if anyone says that Bai Zetsu is a brainless idiot again, he will definitely spit on the other person's face. He has just joined the company and has already planned to let the leader take the blame. Is this something that a brainless person can think of?" Yi Feng's mouth twitched obscurely, and his face was speechless. Puff. Bai Zetsu 007 also couldn't hold it back and laughed directly. "I am very grateful that you think so highly of me, Mr. A-Fei." Yi Feng smiled again and said lightly, "Next, I hope you can cooperate with 007 to attract more White Zetsu with ideals and ambitions to our side. Don't worry, I will definitely get the position of toilet guard." A-Fei raised his head proudly and pulled White Zetsu 007 back into the ground. Until the 2 White Zetsu disappeared completely, Yi Feng turned his eyes to the small house on the side. "Sasuke, have you finished the homework I assigned?" "I don't understand." The hedgehog-headed boy walked out of the shadows and frowned, saying, "So I want to ask you." "What point?" Yi Feng asked with a smile. "The definition of the origin of ninjutsu. Does the 6-path sage really exist?" Sasuke said, his eyes still looking at the place where the 2 White Zetsu disappeared. "Isn't that a legend?" "They exist." Yi Feng nodded and said, "The existence of Ah-Fei and 007 you just saw is directly related to the mother of the 6-path sage." "The 6-path sage has a mother?" Sasuke was stunned. "Then how do you think the 6-path sage appeared? Did he jump out of the cracks in the rocks?" Yi Feng couldn't help laughing and asked humorously. Sasuke's expression suddenly became a little embarrassed, and he coughed twice and said, "So, those 2 guys just now were originally our hostile forces. Did you dig them over?" He listened to the conversation between Yi Feng and Ah-Fei and White Zetsu 007, but he didn't understand some questions. Hostile forces. Yi Feng pondered for a moment, shook his head and smiled. "Seriously speaking, they are not, but just a fragile camp composed of a group of uneducated Gotham citizens." Gotham citizens. Sasuke now understands the meaning of these 4 words, and it's a bit hard to hold back every time he hears them. "Well, the core member of this camp is still your ancestor Uchiha Madara." Yi Feng suddenly spoke. "What?" Sasuke was stunned and said with surprise, "Isn't that guy dead?" "He just wants people to see him dead." Yi Feng patted Sasuke's shoulder, sighed, "But is he really dead?" "Like dead. So he faked his death and secretly built up his power." Sasuke nodded suddenly, and said with disdain, "Humph. I feel that this guy is still far behind. You haven't died yet, but you have already created a bigger scale than him." "Sasuke, I feel that you have a lot of opinions about me in your words." Yi Feng glanced at him and said with a strange look, "I'm still young, are you cursing me to death?" "No, you think too much." Sasuke responded with a flat expression. "Sasuke, why don't you look me in the eye before you say this?" Yi Feng raised his eyebrows. Sasuke still didn't look at him directly, and looked at the distant starry sky to change the subject. I have one last question now, what is a toilet guard? At this moment, the Hokage's office. I don't agree. Danzo looked around at the people around him with a gloomy look, and said in a cold tone, Shaolin Yifeng is a ninja of my root, why should he transfer to the Anbu directly under the Hokage? Danzo, your root's method is not suitable for teaching talented ninjas after all. Mitomen stood up and advised kindly, let go. I have cultivated talents with all my efforts, and you just let them go. Danzo looked at him with a squint. Danzo, you are talking nonsense. Udatane Kaharu sighed and said helplessly, how long has it been since the kid from the Kobayashi family joined your root? You can say that this is a talent you have cultivated with all your efforts. HMPH, I don't care. Danzo snorted coldly and said, no one can take people away from me. Danzo. Sarutobi Hiruzen took a puff of cigarette and said in a flat voice, is your root still an organization affiliated with Konoha? Am I still the Hokage of Konoha? Danzo really didn't expect the other party to say this. Is the friendship in the past all in his eyes? This matter is settled. Sarutobi Hiruzen knocked on the pipe in his hand and took out a stack of research materials from the drawer of his desk. Also, is this yours? The pupils in Danzo's eyes suddenly shrank, and the expression on his face became more gloomy than before. Don't you plan to explain it? Sarutobi Hiruzen said in a flat voice while holding a cigarette in his mouth. I have nothing to explain. At this point, Danzo knew that no matter how much he tried to defend himself, it would be useless. These research materials are top secrets of his root, and ordinary root members have no way of getting access to them. But now they appear in front of the Hokage, so there is only one possibility. An insider. The person who kept these materials betrayed him. Danzo quickly locked the identity of the suspect in his mind, and his heart was burning with anger. I have treated him well, but this fool actually stabbed me in the back. From today on, you stay at home and rest for a while. Sarutobi Hiruzen said lightly. I see. Danzo looked around and said without sadness or joy, you have already discussed to put me under house arrest. This is also a last resort. Look at what you have done. We are all for Konoha, Danzo. Mito Kato and Udatane Kaharu sighed. I remember this, you will regret it. Danzo said a harsh word and left in a huff. Walking out of the Hokage building, a figure appeared behind him. Chen, go inform Yifeng. Without looking back, Danzo gave an order with cold eyes. Tell him to send Shan Zongfeng's head to my residence tomorrow. That's right. The suspect that Danzo locked on was one of his right-hand men, Shan Zongfeng. The reason is also very simple, only this guy is the custodian of those research materials. Apart from Shan Zongfeng, only Danzo himself holds the key. Could it be that the traitor is himself? Hey, get up. Yifeng, who was sleeping soundly in the early morning, was picked up from the bed by Kushina. His hair was messy and he looked a little confused. What's wrong? Monster invasion. Who do you say is a monster, you little fool? Kushina gave him a headbutt and put her hands on her hips. How about it? Isn't this outfit of mine amazing? Yifeng only realized at this time that the red-haired lady had also changed into a black and white maid outfit today. And it was much hotter than what the black-haired lady wore a few days ago. The collarbone under the neck was clearly visible, and the V-neck design could even see the deep cleavage on the chest. She wore a lace maid's headscarf on her head, white garter stockings on her legs, and no shoes on her feet. Yifeng was stunned and his eyes widened. Wow, are you staring at me so intently? Kushina smiled and stepped forward to hug the boy's neck, gently pulling the collar on her chest in front of him, and the trench became deeper at this moment. Master, how about treating me as your breakfast today? Just ask, who can resist such temptation? Yifeng was about to nod, but saw Kushina stretched out her hand and gently pushed him out, grinning. It's a pity, our master is not old enough to eat yet. Ha ha ha. Yifeng's face suddenly darkened. What's even more uncomfortable is that the other party is still telling the truth. Get dressed and wash up, you have to meet your new teacher later. Kushina blushed and touched his lips. Shua got into the soul beads. Of course, she is also shy, but most of the time she is just being stubborn. You asked her to wash up, but you kissed her. Mrs. Makoto looked at her sideways, as if she was staring at a cat stealing fish. What's the big deal? Just do it if you want to. Kushina blinked and retorted, unlike some people, who say one thing and mean another. What do you mean by saying one thing and mean another? Mrs. Makoto was stunned, and her eyes became a little evasive. Still pretending, don't think I don't know what you did last night. Kushina stretched out her hand to hook her bestie's shoulder, and said softly, you tried to steal my first kiss while I was asleep, and you hesitated for a long time. You are not. Mrs. Makoto's face was burning when her embarrassing story was exposed. If I hadn't fallen asleep, how could I have created an opportunity for you? Kushina raised her eyebrows at her and whispered, but unfortunately, the wish failed. That little fool's first kiss is long gone. Is it hard? Did you do it? Mrs. Makoto glared at her angrily. Rina, Karen's mother. Kushina spread her hands and said with a smile. Is it her? Mrs. Makoto was stunned. She originally thought that the only real opponent was this good friend in front of her. But she never thought that there was a master. Since it's not you, how can you still laugh? Makoto turned her eyes to her again, with a suspicious expression. Only a young girl like you would care about this kind of thing. Kushina curled her lips in disdain and said condescendingly, mature women only care about whether they can be fed. Kushina, you are really degenerate. Tisk, you are not much better if you understand it in seconds. How many special postures in Magical Girl have you learned? Shut up, don't mention it anymore. What about Return of Hashirama? Kushina, I seriously suspect that you have turned into a god gold now. The two wives in the Soul Pearl were talking about love and hatred very enthusiastically. Yifeng had already put on black framed glasses and came to the training ground in the East District of Konoha. With silver hair and a black mask below his eyes. Hitaki Kakashi, who was wearing a silver-gray combat uniform and carrying a ninja sword, was already waiting here. He is still a member of the Konoha Anbu now. His eyes are not as casual as in the original plot, and he exudes a solemn temperament. Seeing Yifeng coming, he said calmly, Hitaki Kakashi, appointed by the Hokage as your instructor. Choose. Yifeng opened his mouth to introduce himself, and the golden option interface suddenly popped up. This dog system is specifically stuck at this time to make trouble for me. It's really poisonous. 1. Please let Hitaki Kakashi call you, friend of little boys and girls. 2. Pull out a copy of Encyclopedia of Human Girls Illustrated Edition from behind your butt as a gift for your new teacher. 3. Ask your new teacher with admiration, what kind of experience is it to glue 15 times a night? Little boy girl, my orientation is normal, okay. What the hell is Encyclopedia of Human Girls, and it even has illustrations? You dog system, where on earth did they get this weird thing? Yifeng was complaining in his heart, and he was stunned when he saw the third option. One night, glue 15 times. Is it true? According to what this dog system has done in the past, it should not be aimless. So in other words, this Mr. Kakashi really. Unconsciously taking a breath, Yifeng looked at the white-haired Anbu opposite as if he was looking at an Iron Waist King. Warrior. This is a real warrior, can your kidneys bear it? Yifeng wanted to ask at this time, but he finally held back. He took a deep breath in his heart and said as gently as possible, my name is Zhaolin Yifeng, please teach me. In Kakashi's puzzled eyes, he reached behind his buttocks and a heavy book with a gorgeous cover appeared in Yifeng's palm. This is a gift for you, teacher. Kakashi frowned, wanting to scold him not to do such meaningless things. As an Anbu ninja, you should focus on improving your own strength. Doing such nonsense is simply, hiss, what is that? Kakashi swallowed his words and stared at the mermaid princess with golden shackles on the blue cover. He reached out his hand and took the Monster Girl Encyclopedia. The heavy touch came, and Kakashi realized what he had done. He turned his face away with a stiff expression, coughed twice and said, this kind of book is really too early for a child like you, so I'll leave it here for now. Congratulations on obtaining the Holy Sun Constitution. Yifeng was about to complain about Kakashi's insincere words, but was caught off guard by the reward of this dog system. Constitution. This system can also reward physical fitness. What the hell is the Holy Yang physical fitness? No yin can grow alone, and no yang can grow alone. Men with this physical fitness are born with the ability to practice together and are invincible in 100 battles. And when practicing together, they can also continuously enhance the energy accumulation of the partner to promote mutual progress. Female creatures that come into contact with your skin will have a chance to enter a trance, and your learning talent will be greatly enhanced. Amazing. Yi Feng was stunned by this reward. Natural ability to practice together. The probability of entering a trance when skin contact occurs. Now I really become a succubus in the ninja world, right? The key is that I am not old enough at all. What use can you give me with this ability? It's just pure to mess with people's mentality, you fool. Yi Feng, it's getting late. It seems that because of the short-handedness, the attitude of Kakashi on the opposite side has become much more enthusiastic. Are you ready? Yes, Mr. Kakashi. Yi Feng took a breath and shook off the messy and strange thoughts in his mind. Before we officially start, there is a question that needs to be clarified. In addition to illusion and swordsmanship, what else are you good at? I know a little about them. What? Fire, earth, wind, water, lightning, these 5 types of ninjutsu. I seem to know a little about them. Really, Yi Feng seems to be a little overconfident. Kakashi stretched out his hand and pulled out the ninja sword behind him, narrowed his eyes and said, in this case, how about we have a practical teaching today? It is a good thing for young people to be confident, but overconfidence will cause trouble. Kakashi had an inexplicable sense of mission at this time. He wanted to correct the young genius in front of him. Dark Cave. Black Zetsu, wearing a black robe with red clouds, emerged from the ground, looked around and said, where is Obito? I don't know. A Fae, who was squatting in the corner writing and drawing, glanced at it and said lightly, maybe he is applying glue. Applying glue. Black Zetsu was obviously stunned for a moment, his expression was a little confused. Yes. A Fae stopped his hand movements, stood up and said, a young man full of blood and energy entered the room with 2 clams. I mean, holding the bones of his beloved girl. What else can it be except applying glue? People can't, at least they shouldn't. The corners of Black Zetsu's mouth twitched fiercely, and he instinctively felt that a Fae was talking nonsense. Which normal person can fight with an incomplete corpse? This has broken the bottom line of human beings. But think about it carefully, is Obito's divine gold considered a normal person? And that guy entered the room alone with Nohara Rin's bones and hasn't come out yet, which really makes people wonder what he did in there. Make glue. Unlike Black Zetsu's contemplation, White Zetsu's true body showed excitement. I haven't seen a human being make glue with my own eyes, let's go and see. Forget it, there's no need. Black Zetsu shook his head and said, that guy has been very tense recently, it's good to let him vent. Vent what? As he spoke, Obito, wearing a black cloak, appeared in front of everyone. Are you done? Black Zetsu looked at him and felt that the boy's spirit was indeed a little sluggish. Take care of your body. Shut up, my business has nothing to do with you. Obito thought that he had been found out for crying to Rin all night, and he was a little angry. Is this guy admitting it in disguise? Black Zetsu took a breath of cold air, and even looked at Obito with a bit of awe. He was so willing to do this, did he underestimate him before? Did Uchiha Itachi attack Shaolin Yifeng? Obito didn't notice this, mainly because Black Zetsu's dark face made it difficult to distinguish his expression. According to Itachi himself, they stopped at the right time. Black Zetsu looked at him and said in a low voice, the main reason is that Orochimaru actually interfered. HMPH, that's fine. Obito looked down at him and said coldly, let the White Zetsu clone send a notice to Shaolin Yifeng. If he dares to refuse to join us, his death will come. Obito, I think. Black Zetsu wanted to say that this was a bit inappropriate, but was interrupted by Obito with a wave of his hand, no need to say more. Even without Shaolin Yifeng, the Moon Eye project can be completed as usual. Okay, you are so strong now, right? Black Zetsu took a deep breath, and his dissatisfaction with the partner in front of him increased a little. Of course, it can see that Obito made such a decision just to vent his anger, and he didn't even want to act anymore. But to be honest, it's not Shaolin Yifeng's fault. I don't know that Nohara Lin is your dream lover. You are a little petty, right? Of course, even if he was very dissatisfied, Black Zetsu didn't show it on his face. When choosing between Shaolin Yifeng and Obito, he still chose the latter. In the eyes of Black Zetsu, Xiaolin Yifeng, who has no bloodline, can only be a stepping stone no matter how much he cooperates with it. At this moment, at the eastern training ground of Konoha. So, sister, you wore the maid costume because you lost the bet with Mrs. Makoto? Yifeng asked curiously in his heart. Yes. Kushina's voice was very brisk, and it seemed that she didn't feel unhappy about losing the bet at all. I really didn't expect that even at this point, Danzo still didn't doubt you. Not only did he not doubt you, he also asked you to personally get rid of his most capable subordinates. For this operation, Kushina really wanted to give Danzo a 6. I suddenly realized, Kushina, you lost on purpose, didn't you? Mrs. Makoto's suspicious voice sounded. Maybe you didn't expect Danzo to order Yifeng to get rid of Yamanaka Feng, but you definitely know that Danzo would never suspect Yifeng-kun. Oh, then what's the purpose of my losing on purpose? Kushina asked with a smile. You just want to seduce me in that maid outfit. Mrs. Makoto blurted out. The word seduce is not used properly, it should be called interest. Kushina blinked and said indifferently, but it's normal for an old mother like you to not understand. Old mother. Mrs. Makoto's expression was stunned, and the corners of her mouth twitched and said, in terms of age, I don't seem to be much older than you, right? It's a pity that my life has been forever frozen in the youth of 24. Kushina spread her hands and said with a smile, how old is Makoto? What is it? Oh, 35 for an old lady. Quote. You, is that right? Mrs. Makoto was annoyed, and was caught off guard by Kushina's unethical age calculation. Ahem. Yifeng coughed lightly and interrupted. Sister, how is Miss Nohara Lin now? I told her everything I should say. The little girl is a little depressed now. Kushina put away her smile and sighed. Wait for 2 more days and let her relax. Quote. I can understand that. In Nohara Rin's impression, Obito was a sincere boy who could sacrifice for his friends. He was kind, upright, and friendly, but now he suddenly turned into a newborn who killed his teacher and his wife and did all kinds of bad things. This strong contrast was naturally difficult for the girl who had just revived to accept. What's more, Obito's current blackening was directly related to her. This made Nohara Rin feel even more uncomfortable, and even felt very self-blaming and guilty. Swish. Just as Yifeng was talking to the 2 ladies in the Yunlingzu, a blade of lightning swept across his side. Crack. The wooden stake was split into 2, breaking into 2 evenly. Kakashi's left eye had turned scarlet, and he looked at the wooden stake on the ground and panted, can you even block this? Xiaolin Yifeng, you are really a terrible boy. But unfortunately, I am not weak either. Quote. He moved away in an instant, and quickly formed seals with both hands. Earth escape rock and stone spear. A several meter long rock spear condensed in front of Kakashi and shot out. With a puff, it pierced through a fallen leaf and flew into the distance. Kushina looked at the funny scene of Kakashi fighting the enemy in the void, and her mouth twitched slightly, and she sighed. The ability of mirror flowers and water moons is really shocking no matter how many times I see it. If you get hit, you're basically dead, there's no solution at all. It seems that Mr. Kakashi is having a lot of fun. Yifeng's mouth curled slightly, and a ball of azure lightning appeared in the palm of his right hand. But the time is almost up, let's end it here. Changing his body shape, Yifeng suddenly appeared in front of Kakashi. This is. Looking at the lightning condensed in the other party's hand, Kakashi was shocked and said, Reikiri. Quote. He had only demonstrated this technique twice in front of the opponent, but he learned it so quickly. What a joke. Is this learning speed really possible for a human being? Thoughts flashed through his mind, and Kakashi retreated. He slashed the ninja sword forward, startling a large number of flying birds. Swish. As expected, the ninja sword was placed on Yifeng's shoulder, and Yifeng's right hand wrapped in lightning also rested on Kakashi's waist and abdomen. You are really amazing. It seems that I can no longer continue to teach you. Kakashi put away his sword and said frankly. I had heard from the Hokage that the boy in front of him was an incredible genius. At the age of 10, he created illusions of the level of mirror flower and water moon. At first, Kakashi didn't care. He himself was also a genius, and he also created Chidori and Reikiri. It was not until he actually taught him that Kakashi realized that using the word Genius, to describe the boy in front of him was too conservative. Monster. This guy is simply a monster through and through. No matter what level of ninjutsu, he can get it right away by copying it twice, and even his combat experience is rapidly accumulating and stacking. To be honest, Kakashi has never seen such a monster in his life. What did you say? In the Hokage's office, Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at Kakashi in front of him with a surprised expression and said, Yifeng has already learned your Reikiri. Reikiri is defined as an S-level lightning ninjutsu, and it's only been less than a morning. He has already learned it. It's like this, Lord Hokage. Kakashi lowered his head and said respectfully, Yifeng is a very talented child. It would be a bit misleading for a mediocre subordinate like me to continue to teach him. Don't belittle yourself like this, Kakashi. Sarutobi Hiruzen blew out a smoke ring and said earnestly, in my eyes, you have always been the genius boy who graduated with honors at the age of 5. Lord Third, you still haven't let go of your obsession, right? Kakashi opened his mouth to say something, but was interrupted by Sarutobi Hiruzen. I believe that if Obito and Rin are still alive, they don't want to see you torturing yourself like this. Yes, I will get out as soon as possible. Kakashi was silent for a moment and whispered. This is not the Hokage's order, Kakashi. Sarutobi Hiruzen reached out and patted his shoulder, saying softly, it's just that an old man who is about to die doesn't want to see his excellent juniors go to extremes. The future of Konoha still depends on you. I understand. Kakashi nodded with a moved look. Since you don't want to continue to guide Yifeng, I won't force you. Sarutobi Hiruzen smiled kindly, looking out the window and said, but I hope you can give me a suggestion. Who do you think is more suitable for that child to be his teacher? Sarutobi Hiruzen hoped that the candidate proposed by Kakashi would be him, the Hokage, so that he could naturally accept the fourth apprentice. The potential to surpass the 3 ninjas, no wonder Danzo was so tough and unwilling to let him go. I'm afraid this old guy also wants to accept a disciple, but he can't bring himself to say it directly, so he has dragged it on until now. What a pity, but it's fine this way. How can a truly talented ninja teach that old boy? He deserves it as the Hokage. If I were to judge, I think Yifeng is more suitable for medical ninjutsu. Kakashi suddenly said, interrupting the inner fantasy of his own Hokage. Medical ninjutsu. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked a little dull, and this suggestion obviously did not meet his expectations. Yes, Kakashi nodded solemnly, and said sincerely, Yifeng is a gentle and humble person, and he has a very strong interest in medical ninjutsu. Is this Yifeng's own idea, or your personal conclusion? Sarutobi Hiruzen whispered. Kakashi glanced at the bulging bag on his waist, and said solemnly, it is Yifeng's idea, and it is also my conclusion. I know. Sarutobi Hiruzen nodded and waved his hand, saying, you go down first, Kakashi. His tone and expression were obviously not as enthusiastic as before, and he was secretly blaming this young man for not knowing how to deal with things. I had hinted so clearly, but this guy just came up with, very interested in medical ninjutsu. He was deliberately making things difficult for me, an old man, right? Where can Konoha find such a suitable teacher now? Sarutobi Hiruzen stared at Kakashi's departing back and took 2 puffs of cigarette. While thinking, he suddenly saw the blue cover and the image of the mermaid princess in the other's bag. Hiss. His eyes suddenly widened, and Sarutobi Hiruzen made a gesture and said loudly, wait, Kakashi. In your bag. Huff. Before he finished speaking, Kakashi suddenly accelerated and sprinted, disappearing from Sarutobi Hiruzen's sight like a gust of wind. It was dusk. In Yifeng's small house, the members of the class reunion were eating heartily. It seemed that because of the competition, they acted like starving ghosts, and the various dishes on the table were visibly cleared. However, if we really talk about the number 1 eating ability, it must be Hinata, who looks weak. When others were still struggling to decide whether to eat the second bowl of rice, the eldest lady of the Hyuga family had already finished the 8th bowl in silence. The Ino girl sitting next to her was stunned, took a breath and said, you are really worthy of you, Hinata-chan. This scene was not the first time, but it still shocked her. Hinata was obviously embarrassed by what she said, and her cheeks blushed slightly as she said, sorry. No need to apologize, I was just expressing my feelings. Ino smiled at her and said in a low voice, come to think of it, Hinata actually likes Yifeng-jun, right? Huh, Hinata's blush grew a little bigger, and white steam began to appear on her head. Don't be shy, we are on the same path. Ino patted her shoulder in a friendly manner and whispered, but there is a big problem now. The enemy we have to face may not be simple. Enemy. Little Hinata suppressed her inner shame and showed a curious expression on her face. You should know that Yifeng-jun often goes on blind dates now, right? Yeah, those blind dates are our biggest enemies. Do you want to see those unknown bad women take Yifeng-jun away? No, I don't want to. God knows how much effort Hinata used to say these two words, and her little fists were clenched. Then do you want us to form an alliance? Ino stretched out her hand and said sincerely, drive those hateful bad women out first, and then compete fairly. This will make Yifeng-jun hate it, right? Hinata looked a little hesitant. Don't worry, we won't hurt anyone. Ino forcefully grasped Hinata's small hand, smiled confidently and said, we just use our charm to make them retreat. Did you hear that, Makoto? Kushina, who was holding the spirit pearl, stared at the scene, her lips slightly curved, and said, young girls nowadays are really incredible. They actually want us to retreat. It's really scary. After all, we are all mothers with children. Mrs. Makoto obviously meant something, and said with pretended worry, but we can't compete with girls of the same age. Yifeng didn't say anything, pretending not to hear and continued to correct homework in the small room. Swish. Kushina suddenly appeared without warning, and put one hand around Yifeng's neck. At the same time, she stretched out her other hand and gently waved to Ino, who was secretly observing Yifeng's situation. Ino was stunned, her mouth slightly widened. What's wrong with you, Ino? Hinata noticed that her expression was not right, and followed her line of sight. There was nothing unusual. Yifeng sat at his desk, holding his chin up and seemed to be lost in thought. I just saw. Ino was about to explain to Hinata, when the beautiful red-haired woman appeared again. She kissed the boy she liked hard, and her body suddenly disappeared as a beam of light. Yes, there is a ghost. A ghost. Ah, Hinata blinked, looking confused. At this time, the other classmates were also attracted, and their eyes turned to Ino. A red-haired woman. Ino became visibly nervous, and even began to gesture with her hands and feet. She suddenly appeared next to Yifeng, and then she was like this. What is this like? Naruto scratched his face, full of question marks. Ah, didn't you see it just now? Ino pointed at where Yifeng was, took a breath and said, changed, turned into a black-haired ghost. Sasuke understood now, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Ino, are you tired? Sakura put her hand on her forehead with a worried look on her face, and whispered, how about I take you back home to rest early? Looking at the confused expressions on the faces of the people around her, even Ino herself began to doubt herself. Was she really too tired from doing the questions just now and had hallucinations? The moment Sakura supported her and prepared to walk out of the hut, Ino looked back again in confusion. The two ladies with red hair and black hair stood on both sides of Yifeng, waving to her as if to say goodbye. The evening breeze blew, and the night was shrouded. The members of the class reunion had already left Yifeng's hut and went their separate ways. Only Sasuke remained there, with his hands in his pockets, looking at Yifeng and saying, you are such a bad guy for letting someone else's mother dress up as a ghost to scare people. Does Sasuke think I instigated it? Yifeng's mouth curled slightly, and he laughed softly. Why can't Mrs. Makoto think it's interesting, so she ran out by herself? Nonsense, my mother wouldn't do such boring things. Sasuke said indignantly. Boring things. Yifeng shook his head gently, sighing, so to you, Mrs. Makoto is just a gentle, virtuous, traditional and conservative housewife, right? It seems that as a child, you don't really know your mother well enough. Being ridiculed. He, Uchiha Sasuke, was actually ridiculed by an outsider for not knowing his mother, and the key is that he couldn't refute it. In terms of the degree of understanding of his mother, he is probably not as good as the boy in front of him. After all, the other party has already told his mother. It's so frustrating. We are obviously of the same age, but because of his mother, he always feels that he is a head shorter than the other party. Let's go, Sasuke. Yifeng didn't say anything heartbreaking at this time, and raised his hand to slap the wall. Click. The ground opened to both sides, revealing a deep passage. It's time to take you to see our latest research results. As he spoke, Yifeng glanced outside the door of the hut, and his mouth curled up slightly. Underground base. This is still the familiar layout of Sasuke, but there is a huge hexagonal platform in the center. Yifeng appeared in the center of the platform with a flash step and waved to Sasuke. Do you want to try your current combat strength? Sasuke, who was still observing the surroundings, was stunned and said with a frown, I will fight you. Although he is arrogant, he is not stupid. The abilities Yifeng has shown now have made Sasuke realize that the two of them are not from the same dimension at all. If they really fight, he will only be abused. What's the point? Don't worry, I found a suitable sparring partner for you. Yifeng smiled and raised his hand to snap his fingers. Squeak. A hole opened in the center of the hexagonal platform, and a slender figure in a white long windbreaker slowly emerged from the lift. Sasuke's eyes widened, and his pupils suddenly contracted. It's you, Uchiha Shisui. That's right. The man in front of him was the Uchiha genius who often snatched his brother from him when he was a child and made him cry in anger. Sasuke really didn't expect that even he was resurrected by Yifeng. Long time no see, Sasuke-kun. Shisui smiled and whispered, you've grown so big. Your face. Sasuke only noticed at this time that the two sides of Shisui's face below his forehead were covered with thick white bones, like a white helmet covering his face. Are you surprised? This is the symbol of the Arankar. Shisui explained casually. Arankar. Sasuke looked confused. The soul of the ninja is combined with the power of the hollow created by the leader to merge. At this stage, it is called hollowification. Shisui pointed to the bone mask on his face and said lightly, if you can regain your rationality and the meaning of existence after hollowification, you will become an Arankar like me. Is it like this? Sasuke was moved and took a breath. You don't have to hide anymore. Shisui smiled and glanced at the entrance of the passage. Since he is the leader's classmate, he is our guest. You were right, Ino. Shikamaru's helpless voice sounded, saying, there is indeed a ghost hiding in Yifeng's house, and it is not an ordinary little ghost. Led by him, all the members of the class reunion walked down the stairs. Looking at the huge underground base in front of them, their faces were full of shock and dullness. Hey, am I dreaming? Naruto trembled and said in disbelief, is this still Konoha? Yifeng, that guy, really gave us a big surprise without saying anything. Shikamaru's mouth twitched slightly, and he sighed, now it's good, we are all accomplices. What accomplices? Sakura looked around, and suddenly had a bad premonition in her heart. Yifeng, what exactly is he going to do? Subvert the existing system and create a new world. Sasuke stood on the platform, without sadness or joy, and said, since you have read the textbook, don't you understand the situation? Good, what a great ideal. Ino said with admiration. If it is Yifeng, I think it will succeed. Hinata said, this old system also includes Konoha. Are you really ready? Sasuke looked down at them and said lightly, if you decide to quit now, it's not too late. Yifeng, are you going to destroy Konoha? Naruto's eyes widened and he asked in surprise, why? He did learn a lot during the time he joined the Alumni Association. The identity of Hokage no longer had the original filter in his eyes. But this does not mean that he will agree to destroy Konoha. It's not about destroying Konoha, it's about destroying the existing old system of Konoha. Shikamaru patted his shoulder and explained, there is a difference between the two. But, this will eventually make Konoha the enemy, right? Sakura asked in a panic. She just played the ghost catching game with her bestie, how did she become the enemy of Konoha inexplicably? So, why? Naruto still couldn't understand, and shouted, has Konoha done anything wrong to Yifeng? If you want to ask that, no. Shisui's expression was gentle, and he smiled with his mouth bent. The leader just simply couldn't stand it. See, can't stand it. Naruto's face was dull. Yes, can't stand it. Shisui looked up at the ceiling, and said inexplicably, he couldn't stand the old and young women and children of Uchiha being slaughtered like cattle and sheep, and he couldn't stand the Konoha high-level people taking human lives and laughing it off. And he couldn't stand the son of a hero like you, Naruto, being treated like a pig and a dog. Ah, Naruto is the son of a hero. Are you kidding? Ino and Sakura were surprised. I am. Naruto was even more shocked, pointing his finger at himself and trembling slightly. Uzumaki Naruto, your last name comes from your mother Uzumaki Kushina. Shisui looked at him and said bluntly, and your father is the fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato. Stupid. Except for Shikamaru, all the members of the class reunion fell into a daze. This boy who drinks expired milk every day and is treated like a rat by the neighbors is actually the son of the fourth Hokage. So, it's not the leader who wants to be the enemy of Konoha. Shisui said solemnly, it's the corruption and filth of the old system that is destroying all those who love Konoha. Only by overturning it completely can our home become better. Silence. After Shisui finished speaking, the members of the class reunion looked thoughtful. With Naruto as a living example in front of them, it would be difficult for them to find an excuse even if they wanted to say a few good words for Konoha. I didn't expect that Shisui actually has such a talent for public speaking. In the laboratory of the underground base, Mrs. Makoto was full of admiration, and her two little hands were casually placed on Yifang's shoulders. Why don't you just hug him? What's the point of doing this? Kushina sat on Yifang's lap and pouted her lips and said, if you are not brave enough, how can you take maternity leave in the future? Maternity leave. Mrs. Makoto was stunned on the spot, and her whole face flushed to her ears. Not to mention her, even Yifang couldn't hold it in at this time, and his mouth twitched fiercely. My elder sister is really talking more and more without taboos now, and she is just taking maternity leave. Captain, Chief, can you hear me? The voice of White Zetsu 007 sounded in the surveillance communicator. Yes, you say, Yifang said gently. That ungrateful Uchiha Obito wants you to join his army, and he said that if you don't join, you won't live past tomorrow. White Zetsu 007 paused here and said, do you want me and Afei to find a way to kill him? No need. Yifang chuckled and said lightly, please tell Obito that I will meet with him in the Valley of the End in a week. 2 days later, Takigakure Village. Yifang stood in front of the waterfall, feeling the morning breeze, with a comfortable look on his face. Master Chief. The portable communicator on his wrist flashed blue light, and Mrs. Rina, with a teardrop mole under the corner of her eye, appeared on the screen. White Zetsu 058 and 070 have been connected with the third-generation Tsuchikage Onoki, and the other party is ready to order 400 short-distance communication devices from us at a price of 40 million taels. The so-called short-distance communication device is simply a walkie-talkie. But considering the particularity of the ninja world, Yifang deliberately changed it into a style that is easy to hide. I see, the price of 40 million taels is very suitable. Yifang nodded and asked softly, in addition to the communication device, other products have not been sold. According to Onoki's original words, their Iwagakure village currently only needs strategic materials. Mrs. Rina shook her head, and the bangs on her forehead swayed gently. Strategic. Yifang smiled mockingly, and said lightly, it seems that Onoki is determined to attack Konoha during the Chunin exams, and wants to kill people and make a river of blood. Shaolin Yifeng. A cold voice sounded from behind Yifeng, saying, I didn't expect you to be on time. Anyway, it's the first time to complete the task assigned by the organization. It would be too rude if I was late. Yifeng turned around and said with a smile, you should think so too, right, Kakuzu Sr.? That's right. Standing in front of Yifeng was Kakuzu, who was wearing a black-bottomed red cloud robe. His 1.85-meter tall figure formed a sharp contrast with Yifeng, who was less than 1.5 meters tall. What a pity. Kakuzu's emerald eyes looked down at him, and he sneered playfully, I wanted to use my lateness as an excuse to tear you into pieces. Oh, this is really surprising. Yifeng turned off the communicator on his wrist and smiled leisurely, did I save my life because of my punctuality? It's just a temporary life, kid. Kakuzu stared at him and said in a cold tone, you'd better stay alert throughout this mission. There are no Nagato and Konin to protect you in this village. Although it was a threatening tone, Yifeng responded sincerely, yes, thank you for your warning, Kakuzu-senpai. Boom. Just as he finished speaking, a powerful chakra energy suddenly rose from the center of Takigakure village. Strong winds were everywhere, and gravel flew. The terrifying torrent spread in all directions, and Yifeng's bangs fluttered in the wind, and his clothes rustled. It's really the chakra of the tailed beast, it can actually affect here. Yifeng sighed. It's just the aftermath of the escape. Kakuzu looked at the place where the chakra energy burst out, and said calmly, you should feel lucky that the current Seven Tails is still in a semi-sealed state. As the voice fell, the chakra fluctuations that escaped began to gradually weaken. Wow, it seems that the seal of the jade pot has been completed. It's our turn to perform the mission, kid. Kakuzu jumped down from the top of the waterfall and fell to the ground with a bang. Takigakure, Central Hall. The current leader of Takigakure is called Mizuhasha Shintaro, a middle-aged man with a square face. At this moment, he is sitting in the main seat in the hall, with a slightly anxious expression. Report, the seal of the Seven Tails has been completed. The expression of the leader of the Takanen village did not ease until his subordinate respectfully walked in from the side door holding a white jade jar. He motioned the other party to put the jar in front of him, nodded slightly and said, Dongshin, how is it? Master Dongshin has died of exhaustion. The subordinate lowered his head and said softly, before he died, he said that this was his fate as a Jinchuriki. Please don't blame yourself, leader. Alas, bury his remains in the back mountain. Mizuhasha Shintaro sighed deeply and gave an order. In addition, let the sealing team transfer the Seven Tails to Fu's body as soon as possible. Just as the subordinate was about to bow and accept the order, a cold voice suddenly sounded, I think this is no longer necessary. Who? Mizuhasha Shintaro was stunned and looked at the source of the sound. Bang! The main door of the hall was violently broken open, and two figures, one tall and one short, appeared in front of everyone in the hall. You are. Mizuhasha Shintaro looked at the tall man with a look of horror on his face. Kakuzu. Humph. The kid from the Mizuhasha family, I didn't expect that even a waste like you could become the leader. Kakuzu sneered and said lightly, this village is getting more and more lonely. What do you want to do? Mizuhasha Shintaro instinctively protected the white jade jar in front of him and said angrily, this village there is no place for you to stay. A place to stay? Kakuzu stared at him with his emerald green eyes, and said indifferently, that kind of thing is unnecessary for me. I came here just for the jade pot in your arms. Your target is the seven-tailed fox. Mizuhasha Shintaro took 2 steps back holding the jade pot, and said indignantly, this is the foundation of my Takigakure village, I will never give it to you. Little brat of the Mizuhasha family, do you think you can stop me? Kakuzu stepped forward and said coldly. Don't come over. Mizuhasha Shintaro pressed the lid on the top of the jade pot nervously, gritting his teeth and said, otherwise I will unseal it now, and we will all perish together. Humph, I also want to see how Takigakure village is destroyed by the seven-tailed fox that I have worshipped for decades. Kakuzu said calmly, but do you really dare? Mizuhasha Shintaro opened his mouth and wanted to say something else, but suddenly found that the jade pot he was holding in his arms was gone. He was stunned for a moment, looking around. He saw a young man holding a jade pot in his hand not far away, smiling and saying to him, are you looking for this? How is this possible? Mizuhasha Shintaro stared with disbelief. Why did the jade pot in his arms appear in the other person's hands? How did he do it? Not to mention the leader of the Takanen village, even Kakuzu showed an incredible look at this moment. Just now, his eyes only caught a ray of white shadows. When he came to his senses, the jade pot had already appeared in the boy's hands. Instantaneous body technique. But he had never seen or even heard of this level of instantaneous body. This newcomer is probably not as simple as he appears on the surface. Kakuzu muttered to himself, and his eyes looking at the boy were already a little cautious. Such a huge body is put in such a small jar, I think you must be very frustrated. Yi Feng seemed to be unaware of Kakuzu's eyes, and spoke to the jade pot in his palm. Do you want to be our companion and fly freely in this sky from now on? Quote. Question mark. A big question mark appeared on Kakuzu's head, and he asked with a twitch in the corner of his mouth, Shaolin Yifeng, what are you doing? As you can see, Senior Kakuzu. Yifeng glanced at him and smiled slightly, we are trying to recruit new companions for us. Open your eyes and look, that's the tailed beast. What a companion. Kakuzu didn't know how to complain, this new guy's mental state seemed to have a big problem. Don't do such meaningless things. The mission is completed, we can go back and report. Kakuzu said anxiously. He was really afraid that the boy would say something shocking again and do something incredible. It's not a meaningless thing. Yifeng curled his lips and said gently, look, Nanabe has agreed. Quote. What do you mean by agreed? Before Kakuzu could react, he saw the young man unplug the lid of the jade pot without hesitation. Boom. The powerful chakra energy suddenly burst out and gradually condensed into the form of a large insect with 6 wings and a tail. For the first time in his life, Kakuzu wanted to curse so much, and his face under the mask began to gradually twist. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.